She was a noble princess, trapped in a life of duty and a marriage she never wanted. He was a loyal knight with no title, hiding a truth that could shake the entire kingdom. One night, a forbidden moment changed everything, and when she woke up far from the castle, whispers turned into scandal. But what really happened that night? And why will her next choice change not just her future, but the fate of the realm? Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you like the story and where you're watching from and why you're following this reading. The grand hall of Eldoria Castle sparkled with the light of 1,000 golden candles. Nobles dressed in their finest silks and velvets danced and laughed, goblets of wine flowing freely as musicians played a lively tune that echoed against the ancient stone walls. Yet amid all this revelry, Princess Isabel of Eldoria stood alone by a pillar, her emerald eyes distant and her smile a practiced illusion. At 38, Isabel possessed a beauty that had only deepened with time: high cheekbones, ivory skin, and auburn hair that cascaded down her back like autumn fire. But tonight, her graceful features were drawn tight with an unspoken heaviness. Each sip of wine she took was meant to dull the ache in her chest, the knowledge that soon she would be handed over to Duke Radcliffe of Alvermont like chattel in a political bargain, struck years before she had any say in the matter. From across the room, the Duke watched her with possessive eyes. 45, stern and calculating, he viewed her as nothing more than a trophy to be won, a vessel for heirs, and a means to secure his place in the royal lineage. Isabel took another long drink, feeling the warmth of the wine spread through her veins, offering momentary comfort. It was then that she noticed him, Sir Leonhart of Valgreen, standing at attention near the king's table. Unlike the other knights who allowed themselves some measure of enjoyment during the festivities, Leonhart remained vigilant, his powerful frame encased in polished armor that reflected the candlelight. At 40, his face bore the weathered marks of battles fought and honor earned, but it was his eyes that always caught her attention, deep blue and impossibly intense, as if they could see straight through the facade she presented to the world. Their gazes met for just a moment, and Isabel felt her cheeks flush with more than just the effects of wine. She quickly looked away, but the brief connection left her heart racing. Over the years, she had noticed him watching her with a respect and tenderness that no one else ever showed her, not as a princess, not as a political pawn, but as a woman. "More wine, Your Highness?" asked a servant, appearing at her side with a pitcher. "Yes, please," Isabel murmured, extending her goblet. Perhaps if she drank enough, she could forget the prison of her title, if only for one night. Hours passed, and the wine flowed freely. Isabel laughed too loudly at jests that weren't funny, danced too closely with partners who meant nothing to her, and gradually felt the walls of the castle begin to close in. The heat of the hall, the noise of the celebration, the weight of eyes upon her, it all became too much to bear. With a mumbled excuse to her ladies-in-waiting, she slipped away from the great hall, stumbling slightly as she made her way down a darkened corridor. She needed air, space, a moment where she wasn't Princess Isabel, future bride of a man she could never love. The winter garden was silent and cool, bathed in moonlight that filtered through glass panels in the ceiling. Ancient marble columns supported arches that framed the night sky, and a light mist hung in the air, creating a dreamlike quality that matched her wine-fogged mind. Isabel breathed deeply, feeling the tight knot in her chest begin to loosen. "You shouldn't be out here alone, Your Highness." The deep voice startled her, and she turned too quickly, losing her balance. Strong hands caught her before she could fall, and suddenly she was looking up into the concerned face of Sir Leonhart. I needed to escape," she said, her words slightly slurred. "Just for a moment. From everything. From what they expect of me. From what they're making me do." His hands remained on her arms, steadying her, and she was acutely aware of how close they stood. In the silvery light, his features seemed softer, his usual stoic expression replaced with something more vulnerable. "I understand the need for escape," he said quietly. "But the night air is cold, and your absence will be noticed." Isabel shook her head, a sudden defiance rising within her. Let them notice. Let them wonder. For once, I want to be something other than what they've decided I am. Emboldened by wine and desperation, she stepped closer to him. Do you know what it's like, Sir Leonhard, to have every moment of your life planned by others, to be valued only for what marriage alliance you can bring? His eyes darkened with an emotion she couldn't name. I may not know that particular burden, Princess, but I understand having a path chosen for you. At least you have your sword, she whispered. You can fight. I have nothing but smiles and courtesies. Without thinking, Isabel reached up to touch his face, tracing the scar that ran along his jaw, evidence of battles fought and survived. He stood perfectly still, not moving away but not encouraging her either, caught between duty and desire. You've always looked at me differently, she murmured. Not as a princess, just as me. The tension between them was electric, years of unspoken admiration culminating in this moment, hidden in shadows and mist. Isabel rose on her tiptoes, and before either of them could reconsider, her lips found his. The kiss was brief but devastating in its impact, tender yet filled with a longing neither had acknowledged until now. For one heartbeat, Leonhard responded, his lips moving against hers with a gentleness that belied his warrior's strength. Then, as if suddenly remembering himself, he pulled away, his expression a storm of conflict. Forgive me, Your Highness. This cannot be, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Isabel swayed, the full weight of what she'd done crashing down on her wine-addled mind. I shouldn't have. You need rest, Leonhard said firmly, though his eyes betrayed his inner turmoil. The celebration has been too much, and you're not well. Before she could protest, he had wrapped his cloak around her shoulders and was guiding her away from the garden, down a servant's corridor where they wouldn't be seen. Isabel found herself leaning against him, her head spinning with confusion and the effects of too much wine. Where are we going? She asked, her words slurring more heavily now as exhaustion compounded her inebriation. Somewhere safe, was all he said. The night became a blur of movement, a horse, the sound of hoofbeats on stone, then earth, the cool night air against her face as they rode away from the castle. Isabel drifted in and out of consciousness, aware only of the strong arms that held her securely, preventing her from falling. When she finally awoke, sunlight was streaming through unfamiliar windows. Isabel blinked, disoriented, taking in the stone walls hung with old tapestries depicting hunting scenes. The bed beneath her was comfortable but not opulent, covered in simple but fine linens. This was not her chamber in the castle. Sitting up with a groan, she pressed a hand to her throbbing head. The events of the previous night came back in fragments. The wine, the garden, the kiss. The door opened, and Leonhard entered, carrying a tray with bread, cheese, and a steaming cup of herbal tea. He had removed his armor and wore a simple tunic and breeches, but his posture remained rigid, formal. Where am I? Isabel asked, her voice hoarse. Valgreen Keep, he replied, setting the tray beside her. My family's fortress. You're safe here. Why did you bring me here? She demanded, panic beginning to rise. The court, they'll think. You needed protection, Leonhard said, his eyes not meeting hers. You were not yourself last night. Isabel's cheeks burned with embarrassment as more memories surfaced. I kissed you. You were unwell, Your Highness. The wine. Don't, she interrupted. Don't dismiss it as merely the wine. I may have been emboldened by it, but I knew what I was doing. A heavy silence fell between them, charged with unspoken feelings. Outside the chamber, Isabel could hear the hushed voices of servants. An occasional nervous laugh quickly silenced. What aren't you telling me? She asked, suddenly alert to the tension in the air. Leonhardt's jaw tightened. There are rumors, Princess. Word has spread quickly. What rumors? Her heart began to race. That you fled with me willingly. That you confessed certain feelings while in your cups. Feelings that would complicate your betrothal to the Duke. Isabel felt the blood drain from her face. What did I say? You spoke of not loving him, of your heart belonging elsewhere. His voice was carefully neutral, but his eyes finally met hers, and what she saw there made her breath catch. The entire court has heard by now. The Duke is furious. Your father has sent riders in all directions. The full weight of her situation crashed down on her like a wave. One impulsive night, one moment of weakness, and her entire future, the delicate political balance of the kingdom, was thrown into chaos. "I've put you in danger," she whispered. "My safety is not what matters now," he replied. "It's yours that concerns me, the accusations being made." A knock at the door interrupted him. A nervous-looking maid entered, bobbing a quick curtsy. "Sir, riders approaching. They bear the king's banner." Leonhardt nodded grimly. "Tell the steward to prepare for guests." After the maid left, he turned back to Isabel. "It seems we have little time left. What will happen now?" she asked, her voice small. "That depends on what you choose to tell them," he answered, his expression unreadable. "But know this, princess. Whatever comes, I regret nothing." Before she could respond, he bowed deeply and left the chamber, closing the door behind him with a quiet click that somehow sounded like the ending of something that had barely begun. Isabel sat alone in the unfamiliar room, her head pounding and her heart heavier than it had ever been. The kiss that should never have happened had set in motion events beyond her control, and now she found herself in greater peril than she could have imagined, not just politically, but emotionally. For in the light of day she could no longer deny what the wine had only made her brave enough to act upon. She was in love with a man she could never have. The news of Princess Isabel's disappearance spread through the kingdom like wildfire, each retelling more scandalous than the last. In the great hall of Eldoria Castle, the morning after the celebration, King Edmund paced before his throne, his face lined with worry and barely contained anger. Courtiers whispered behind their hands, eyes darting nervously toward the massive oak doors that remained guarded by stone-faced knights. She was seen leaving with Sir Leonhardt. Lady Catherine, the king's most trusted adviser, reported in hushed tones. "According to 3 separate witnesses, Your Majesty." "Leonhardt?" The king's voice betrayed his disbelief. "My most loyal knight?" "The same, sire. The princess was visibly affected by wine, they say. He was escorting her, supporting her weight." The Duke of Alvermont, who had been silently seething by the window, turned sharply. At 45, Radcliffe was a man accustomed to getting what he wanted, and the public embarrassment of his betrothed's disappearance had turned his normally pale complexion crimson with rage. "Escorting?" he spat. "A more apt description would be abduction, my lord, or perhaps seduction. Either way, I demand satisfaction for this insult to my honor." King Edmund raised a hand to quiet him. "We don't know what happened yet, Radcliffe. Leonhardt has served this crown faithfully for 20 years. There must be an explanation." "The explanation is clear enough," the Duke sneered. "Your knight has betrayed you, and your daughter has shamed herself. The question now is what will be done about it." The king's eyes flashed dangerously. "Mind how you speak of my daughter, Alvermont. Crown princess or not, she is still my child." A tense silence fell over the hall, broken only when the doors swung open and Queen Eleanor entered, her regal bearing commanding immediate respect despite the worry evident in her eyes. "My scouts have located them," she announced. "Valgreen Keep, his family's stronghold. Send riders immediately," the king ordered. "Bring her home, and him to answer for this." As couriers rushed to carry out the king's commands, the Duke approached him, voice lowered to ensure only the king would hear. "The alliance between our kingdoms hinges on this marriage, Your Majesty. I suggest we accelerate the wedding plans once the princess is returned, before rumors can further damage her reputation, and mine." The king regarded him coldly. "We will discuss terms after my daughter is safely home, Radcliffe. Not before." Miles away at Valgreen Keep, Isabel stood at the window of her chamber, watching as a contingent of royal guards approached the fortress gates. The morning sun glinted off their armor, and the Eldoria banners snapped in the wind. She clutched Leonhardt's offered cloak tightly around her shoulders, trying to find strength in its warmth. A soft knock at the door preceded Leonhardt's entrance. He had donned his formal armor again, the silver polished to a mirror shine, the emblem of his house, a falcon in flight, emblazoned on his breastplate. Even now, facing potential disgrace, he carried himself with dignity. "They're here for me, aren't they?" Isabel asked without turning from the window. "Yes, Princess, and for me as well, I imagine." His voice was steady, betraying none of the turmoil she knew he must feel. Isabel turned to face him, her head still aching from the previous night's excess, but her mind now painfully clear. "What will you tell them?" "The truth, that you were unwell, and I brought you here for your safety and protection." "And the kiss?" she challenged, taking a step toward him. Leonhardt's composure faltered for just a moment, a flash of vulnerability crossing his features before he regained control. "That is for you to decide, Your Highness. I will not speak of it if you wish it to remain private." "And if I don't?" Isabel asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He met her gaze directly then, and the intensity in his blue eyes made her breath catch. "Then I will face whatever consequences come. I have never lied to my king, and I won't begin now, even to save myself." Isabel closed the distance between them, stopping just short of touching him. "Why did you bring me here, Leonhardt? Truly? You could have found a chamber in the castle, summoned my ladies, maintained propriety. Instead, you risked everything." For a long moment, he simply looked at her, as if weighing how much truth to reveal. Finally, he spoke. "Because in that moment, I thought not as a knight, but as a man who couldn't bear to see you hurt. The court is merciless with its gossip, Princess. Had anyone seen you in such a state?" "You were protecting me from scandal," she concluded, a hint of disappointment coloring her voice. "I was protecting you," he corrected softly. "Not your title, not your position. You." The distinction wasn't lost on Isabel. Before she could respond, however, they heard the clamor of horses in the courtyard below and the sound of voices raised in formal greeting. "They're here," Leonhardt said, stepping back and reassuming his formal posture. "We must go down to meet them." Isabel nodded, smoothing her rumpled gown as best she could. "What happens now, Sir Leonhardt?" "Now we face the consequences of our actions, Princess. Together or separately, that choice is yours." She studied his face, searching for any sign of regret or fear, but found only quiet resolve. "I won't let you face this alone. Whatever comes, we will face it together." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "As you wish, Your Highness." The great hall of Valgreen Keep was nowhere near as grand as Eldoria castles, but it possessed a rustic dignity. Stone walls adorned with ancient weapons and hunting trophies, a massive hearth at one end where a fire crackled despite the morning warmth. It was here that Isabel and Leonhardt received the royal delegation, led by Sir Galen, captain of the king's personal guard. "Princess Isabel," Galen said, bowing deeply, "your father has commanded your immediate return to the castle." "I understand, Sir Galen," she replied with as much dignity as she could muster in her wrinkled gown, her hair loosely braided by one of the keep's maids. Galen turned his attention to Leonhardt, his expression hardening. "Sir Leonhardt, you are to surrender your sword and return with us to answer before the king for your actions." Leonhardt didn't hesitate. He unbuckled his sword belt and handed the weapon to his fellow knight. "I go willingly, and will answer truthfully to any charges." As they prepared to depart, servants bustled about, bringing Isabel a riding cloak and fresh water for the journey. In the midst of the preparations, she managed to find a moment alone with Leonhardt in the shadow of the keep's stone archway. "I'm sorry," she whispered urgently. "This is all my fault, my impulsiveness, my weakness." "There is no fault in honesty, Princess," he interrupted gently. "What happened between us may have been unwise, but it wasn't wrong." "They'll punish you," she insisted, her voice trembling. "The Duke will demand it." Leonhardt's expression remained serene, almost resigned. "I have lived my life by a code of honor, Your Highness. I won't abandon it now by denying what I feel." "And what is that?" Isabel pressed, needing to hear the words before they were swept back into the suffocating propriety of court life. His eyes softened as he gazed down at her. "That since the first day I saw you, not as a child princess, but as the woman you've become, I have loved you from afar. Not for your crown or your beauty, though both are dazzling, but for your spirit, your kindness, your strength that you yourself don't yet fully see." Tears welled in Isabel's eyes, but before she could respond, Sir Galen approached, his expression making it clear their private conversation was at an end. "The horses are ready, Princess. We must depart immediately." The journey back to Eldoria Castle was conducted in tense silence. Isabel rode in a covered carriage, alone with her thoughts and fears. Through the small window, she could see Leonhardt riding among the guards, his hands bound loosely before him, a formality that nonetheless made her heart ache with guilt and anger. As they approached the castle, she could see crowds had gathered to witness their return. News had traveled fast, and the people's curiosity had been piqued by tales of their princess's scandalous night. Some faces showed concern, others judgment, and still others a kind of excited anticipation for the drama unfolding in their usually predictable royal household. The carriage rolled to a stop in the castle courtyard, where King Edmund and Queen Eleanor waited at the steps, their expressions unreadable. The Duke of Alvermont stood slightly behind them, his eyes cold with calculation. When Isabel emerged from the carriage, she ignored protocol and ran straight to her mother, who embraced her tightly despite the watching eyes. "Are you harmed?" the Queen whispered. "No, Mother. Sir Leonhardt protected me. He did nothing wrong." Queen Eleanor squeezed her daughter's hands. "The truth isn't always enough, my dear. Be prepared." King Edmund stepped forward then, his relief at seeing his daughter safe quickly masked by royal authority. "Princess Isabel, you will retire to your chambers immediately. We will speak later." As Isabel was escorted away by her ladies-in-waiting, she caught one last glimpse of Leonhardt being led in the opposite direction, toward the council chambers where the king would hear his account. Their eyes met briefly across the courtyard, a silent communication that spoke volumes in its brevity. In her chambers, Isabel was bathed and dressed in fresh clothing, her hair properly arranged, and her appearance restored to that befitting a crown princess. But inside, she felt changed irrevocably. The walls of her gilded cage seemed more confining than ever, now that she had tasted, however briefly, what it meant to be seen and loved for herself alone. As evening fell, her mother visited her, closing the door firmly behind her to ensure privacy. "The entire kingdom speaks of nothing else," Queen Eleanor said without preamble. "Your disappearance, your return, the brave knight who either kidnapped or rescued you, depending on who tells the tale." Isabel sat at her writing desk, absently tracing patterns on the polished wood. "And what does father believe?" "Your father is conflicted. Leonhardt has been questioned for hours. He maintains he acted only to protect you from embarrassment, but—" The Queen hesitated. "But?" Isabel prompted. "He admitted to feelings for you when directly asked. He refused to lie, even when doing so might have saved him." Isabel closed her eyes, a mixture of pride and fear washing over her. "What will happen to him?" "That depends largely on you, my daughter." Queen Eleanor sat beside Isabel, taking her hands. "The Duke is demanding your marriage be moved forward immediately. He claims it's the only way to quell the rumors and preserve both your reputations." "And if I refuse?" Isabel asked, though she already knew the answer. "Then the alliance with Alvermont fails. Our eastern border becomes vulnerable again. And Leonhardt—" The Queen didn't finish, but she didn't need to. Isabel stood abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked the castle gardens, where, just one night ago, everything had changed. "So I must sacrifice my happiness and his life for politics." "It has ever been thus for women of our station," her mother replied softly. "I had hoped for you. Perhaps a different path. But we must face what is, not what we wish could be." Isabel turned, her eyes shining with sudden tears. "I love him, Mother. Not as a fantasy or an escape. I love him truly." Queen Eleanor's expression softened with understanding and something else, a flicker of recognition, perhaps even of shared experience. "Then you have a difficult choice ahead, my dear. For now, rest. Tomorrow will bring challenges enough." After her mother left, Isabel sat alone at her window until the stars appeared, thinking of Leonhardt in whatever cell or chamber held him now. Was he thinking of her too? Did he regret the moment of truth between them? Or was he, like her, clinging to it as the one real thing in a world of calculated appearances? Tomorrow she would have to decide, between duty and desire, between a kingdom's needs and her own heart, between a life of quiet desperation and the risk of something true. But tonight she simply remembered the touch of his lips against hers, and allowed herself to feel, for perhaps the last time, the freedom of being truly known. The morning sun cast long shadows across Eldoria Castle as Princess Isabel stood before the ornate mirror in her chambers, attendants fussing with her appearance. They had dressed her in a gown of deep royal blue trimmed with gold, the colors of the kingdom, a deliberate choice to remind everyone who saw her of her position and responsibilities. Her auburn hair was arranged in an elegant coiffure, with not a strand out of place, and a delicate gold circlet rested on her brow. To anyone who looked upon her, she appeared every inch the royal princess, composed, dignified, and untouchable. Only her eyes betrayed the storm raging within. "The council awaits, Your Highness," said Lady Beatrice, her chief lady-in-waiting, a woman who had served her since childhood. "Are you prepared?" Isabel met her own reflection's gaze. "Does it matter if I am not?" Lady Beatrice's expression softened with rare sympathy. "If I may speak freely, Princess." When Isabel nodded, she continued, "In my 40 years at court, I have seen many political marriages. Some find contentment. Some even find love, eventually." "And the others?" Isabel asked quietly. "The others find ways to endure," Beatrice replied, her tone making it clear which outcome she considered most likely for her mistress. Isabel squared her shoulders. "Then I shall have to be stronger than merely enduring." With a final adjustment to her gown, she swept from the chamber, 2 guards falling into step behind her as she made her way through the castle corridors. Servants and courtiers alike stopped to bow or curtsy as she passed, their eyes following her with undisguised curiosity. Their whispers trailed in her wake like persistent shadows. The great council chamber doors stood open, revealing the massive oak table around which sat the kingdom's most powerful men. Her father at the head, flanked by his trusted advisors, military commanders, and representatives from allied lands. The Duke of Alvermont occupied a place of prominence near the king, his thin lips curled in what might have been meant as a smile but looked more like a predator's assessment. Notably absent was Sir Leonhart. As Isabel entered, all rose in deference to her rank. She inclined her head slightly in acknowledgement, but her eyes sought her father's. King Edmund's face was carved from stone, revealing nothing of his thoughts. "Princess Isabel," he said formally, "you come before this council to address the matter of your departure from the castle 2 nights past, and the circumstances of your return." "I do, father," she replied, her voice clear and steady despite her racing heart. "The council has heard testimony from Sir Leonhart of Valgreen regarding these events. He claims sole responsibility for removing you from the castle without proper escort or permission, citing concern for your well-being after you had partaken too freely of wine." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Isabel could feel the Duke's cold gaze boring into her. "Is this account accurate?" the king asked. Isabel lifted her chin. "It is partially accurate, Your Majesty. I did indeed consume more wine than was wise during the celebration. However, I was not abducted. I left willingly with Sir Leonhart when he offered to escort me to fresh air." "And did you willingly leave the castle grounds entirely?" pressed Lord Harwick, an elderly advisor known for his conservative views. "Did you consent to being taken to Valgreen Keep, far from your royal household and proper chaperones?" Isabel considered her words carefully. "I was not in a state to make such decisions clearly, my lord. Sir Leonhart acted as he believed best for my safety and reputation." "Your reputation?" the Duke interjected with silky menace. "Is precisely what concerns us all, Princess. Whispers already circulate throughout the kingdom. A knight spent alone with a knight, regardless of his intentions, casts shadows on your honor, and by extension, on any union you might enter." His meaning was unmistakable. He was questioning her virtue, the implication hanging in the air like poison. Before Isabel could respond, Queen Eleanor spoke from her position near the king. "Let us be clear, Duke Alvermont. Are you suggesting that my daughter's honor has been compromised?" The Duke's smile tightened. I merely point out the perception, Your Majesty. The reality is, he spread his hands, known only to the princess and Sir Leonhart. Then let me dispel any doubt, Isabel said firmly. No impropriety occurred between myself and Sir Leonhart. He treated me with nothing but respect and concern for my well-being. She did not mention the kiss. That moment belonged to her alone, a treasure she would not allow this gathering of power-hungry men to tarnish with their judgments. The knight himself has affirmed as much under questioning, King Edmund added, a flash of irritation crossing his features. Unless you are calling both my daughter and one of my most decorated knights liars, Alvermont? The Duke bowed his head slightly. Of course not, Your Majesty. I merely suggest that to prevent further damage to the princess's reputation, we should accelerate our planned union. A royal wedding would put all speculation to rest and reinforce the alliance between our kingdoms. I agree, said Lord Harwick. The sooner the princess is properly wed, the sooner this unfortunate incident will fade from public memory. Isabel's heart sank as murmurs of agreement spread around the table. She had expected this, but the reality of it still felt like a noose tightening around her neck. And what of Sir Leonhart? She asked, forcing the question through lips that suddenly felt numb. What is to be his fate? A heavy silence fell over the chamber. King Edmund's expression darkened. Sir Leonhart has been relieved of his duties at court, he finally said. As punishment for his lapse in judgment, he will be assigned to the northern garrison at Frostwatch Keep. Isabel struggled to maintain her composure. Frostwatch was the most remote outpost in the kingdom, a frozen, desolate place where men were sent either as severe punishment or to be forgotten. It was as good as exile. That seems excessively harsh for an act of protection, she said, unable to keep a tremor from her voice. Protection that overstepped all bounds of propriety, countered Lord Harwick. The king is being merciful. Others called for more permanent consequences. The implication sent a chill through Isabel's blood. Execution. They had considered executing Leonhart for nothing more than caring for her. When am I to be married? She asked, changing tack, needing to understand the full scope of what was being decided for her. The council proposes 1 month from today, the Duke replied smoothly. Sufficient time for preparations befitting a royal wedding, but prompt enough to address current concerns. 1 month. 30 days until the end of any hope for a life with meaning, with love. And I have no say in this matter? Isabel asked, looking directly at her father. King Edmund met her gaze, and for a brief moment she saw not the king but the father, conflicted, pained by her suffering, yet bound by duties larger than either of them. The alliance with Alvermont secures our eastern border against Northumbria's aggression, he said, his tone softer but no less final. It protects thousands of our subjects from the threat of war. Your marriage is not merely a personal matter, Isabel. It is a shield for our kingdom. The truth of his words didn't make them easier to bear. Isabel looked around the table, at the men who controlled kingdoms and armies and alliances, and felt achingly alone. These men viewed her not as a person with hopes and desires, but as a playing piece on their grand political board. Then I shall do my duty, she said, the words tasting like ash in her mouth, as I have always done. There is wisdom in acceptance, Princess, the Duke said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Our union will bring stability to both our lands. In time, you may even find contentment in the role of Duchess. Isabel simply looked at him, making no effort to hide her disdain. I'm certain I shall find ways to endure, my lord. The barb wasn't lost on the Duke, whose smile faltered momentarily. This council is adjourned, King Edmund declared, sensing the dangerous undercurrents. Preparations for the royal wedding will begin immediately. As the assembly dispersed, Isabel remained standing, feeling as though her feet were rooted to the stone floor. Only when the chamber had emptied, save for her parents, did she allow her rigid posture to soften. Where is he? She asked quietly. The king and queen exchanged glances. Sir Leonhart is being held in the eastern tower until his departure for Frostwatch tomorrow, Queen Eleanor answered. I wish to see him. Isabel, her father warned, that would be most unwise. The gossip is already. Let it be my wedding gift then, she interrupted, a bitter edge to her voice. One conversation to thank the man who protected me before you send him to freeze at the edge of the world and chain me to a man who sees me only as a means to power. King Edmund sighed heavily, suddenly looking every one of his 58 years. You speak as though I desire your unhappiness, daughter. I do not. But sometimes a monarch must put the needs of many above the desires of one, even when that one is beloved. I understand duty, father, Isabel replied. Better than you know. I am not asking to escape my fate. I am asking for a moment of grace before I face it. After a long pause, the king nodded. 1 hour, supervised by the captain of the guard. No more. Thank you, Isabel said, genuine gratitude softening her features. As she turned to leave, Queen Eleanor called after her. Isabel. When her daughter paused, she added gently, Sometimes the paths we think closed to us have doors we haven't yet seen. Isabel pondered her mother's cryptic words as she made her way to the eastern tower. Captain Galen, a respectful 3 paces behind her. What doors could possibly exist in the prison of her circumstances? The eastern tower was one of the oldest parts of the castle, its narrow stone staircase winding upward to a series of small chambers once used as noble apartments, but now primarily functioning as holding cells for those of rank who found themselves at odds with the crown. Leonhardt stood at the window when she entered, gazing out at the kingdom he had served faithfully for decades. He turned at the sound of the door, his eyes widening at the sight of her. Princess, he said, bowing deeply. Even here, in confinement, he maintained the perfect form of a knight. Sir Leonhardt, she replied, then glanced meaningfully at Captain Galen, who had positioned himself just inside the doorway. I'll remain by the door, Princess, Galen said, understanding her unspoken request for some semblance of privacy. For propriety's sake. Isabel nodded gratefully, then moved closer to Leonhardt, lowering her voice. They're sending you to Frostwatch. I know. His expression remained stoic, but she could see the pain in his eyes. It is a fair judgment, considering the alternatives. Fair? She whispered fiercely. It's exile, and we both know it. A sad smile touched his lips. Better exile than execution, Princess. Some in the council called for my head. For what? For keeping me safe? For seeing me home when I was vulnerable? For daring to touch what can never be mine, he replied softly, his gaze holding hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. They know, Isabel. Perhaps not about the kiss specifically, but they see the way I look at you, the way you look at me. That is threat enough to their plans. She moved closer still, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him, though they didn't touch. I'm to be married in a month, she told him, her voice barely audible. Leonhardt closed his eyes briefly, as if absorbing a physical blow. The Duke will gain a treasure he doesn't deserve and can never truly value. I don't want to live the rest of my life never having said what I feel, Isabel said, her composure beginning to crack. They can take my future from me, but they can't take this moment. I love you, Leonhardt, not as a princess loves a subject, but as a woman loves a man, completely, truly. Leonhardt's breath caught. For a moment the disciplined knight fell away, and she saw only the man, vulnerable, longing, his heart laid bare in his eyes. And I have loved you, he confessed, since you were old enough to know your own mind. Not for your crown or your beauty, though both are dazzling. I love your courage, your kindness, the way you care for those who serve you as though their lives hold equal value to your own. He reached out slowly, giving her time to withdraw if she wished, and when she didn't, he gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. The simple touch held more tenderness than any embrace. I will carry that love with me to Frostwatch and beyond, he said. Whether in this life or the next, my heart is yours, Princess Isabel of Eldoria. A tear slipped down her cheek. What am I to do? How am I to bear it? Leonhardt's expression grew serious. You will endure because you must, because your people need you to be strong. But know this. His voice dropped even lower. I will find a way back to you if there is breath in my body. The Duke is a man, not a god, Leonhardt interrupted. And men can be outmaneuvered, outsmarted, even outfought when necessary. Hope flickered in Isabel's heart for the first time since the council meeting. You're planning something. Not yet, he admitted. But I will. Every day at Frostwatch, every cold night, every lonely hour, I will be thinking of nothing else. Captain Galen cleared his throat discreetly. 5 minutes remaining, Princess. Isabel nodded acknowledgement without turning. I should go, she said to Leonhardt. But know that whatever vows they force from my lips, my heart has already made its choice. Leonhardt took her hand and, with the formal grace of a knight to his sovereign, pressed a kiss to her knuckles. The gesture was proper enough to avoid censure, yet the warmth of his lips against her skin sent a current through her body that was anything but formal. Until we meet again, Princess, he said, straightening, whether in this world or beyond, I remain ever your faithful servant. As Isabel turned to leave, her composure carefully reconstructed, she felt a strange new resolve forming within her. She would play the dutiful princess, the obedient daughter, the political bride, for now. But like Leonhardt, she would be planning, watching, waiting for an opportunity. And when it came, she would be ready. The royal gardens of Eldoria Castle were in full bloom, their vibrant colors and sweet perfumes a stark contrast to the heaviness in Princess Isabel's heart. 3 days had passed since her farewell to Leonhardt, 3 days since she'd watched from her chamber window as he rode north toward exile, his back straight and proud, even in disgrace. Since then, she had moved through the castle like a ghost, performing her duties with mechanical precision while her thoughts remained far away, traveling with a lone rider on the northern road. The wedding preparations had begun in earnest, seamstresses measuring her for an elaborate gown, cooks planning feasts, minstrels composing ballads to celebrate the union of Eldoria and Alvermont. Isabel endured it all with a mask of serene acceptance that fooled everyone except those who knew her best. It was twilight now, the gardens bathed in the soft golden light of the setting sun. Isabel had dismissed her ladies, claiming a desire for solitude and reflection. In truth, she had come seeking her mother, having sent a private message requesting a meeting away from prying eyes and listening ears. Queen Eleanor was waiting by the ancient oak that stood at the center of the garden's maze, a place that had served as their private retreat since Isabel was a child. At 58, the queen remained a striking figure, her auburn hair now streaked with silver, her posture regal, her green eyes, so like her daughter's, sharp with intelligence. "You wish to speak with me?" the queen asked as Isabel approached. "Yes," Isabel replied, glancing around to ensure they were truly alone. "I need to understand something you said to me after the council meeting, about doors I haven't seen." A slight smile touched the queen's lips. "I wondered if you would catch that." "What did you mean, Mother? What doors could possibly exist when my future has been decided for me?" Queen Eleanor gestured to a stone bench beneath the oak's sprawling branches. As they sat, she reached for her daughter's hand, her touch gentle, but her eyes intense and serious. "What I am about to tell you I have never spoken of to another soul, not even your father," she began. "It is a story from before you were born, when I too faced a marriage arranged for alliance rather than affection." Isabel leaned forward, intrigued. "You've never spoken of that time." "Because it is painful, even now." The queen's gaze grew distant. "Before I was promised to your father, I loved another man, a knight commander in my father's army named Thomas of Willowbrook. He was brave, honorable, and looked at me as though I were made of starlight." She smiled sadly at the memory. "Not unlike the way Sir Leonhardt looks at you." "What happened?" Isabel asked, her voice hushed. "Politics happened. War threatened. Alliances needed to be forged. My father arranged my marriage to Edmund, then Crown Prince of Eldoria, to secure peace between our kingdoms." Eleanor sighed. "I was devastated. I considered running away, even ending my life. Dramatic thoughts of a young woman who believed love was all that mattered." "But you married father," Isabel said. "You did your duty." "I did. But not before Thomas and I—" The queen hesitated, then continued with quiet conviction. "Not before we shared one night together. pledging ourselves to each other in the only way we could. Isabel's eyes widened. "Mother, I don't regret it," Eleanor said firmly. "It was my choice. Perhaps the only true choice I was ever allowed to make. And afterward I carried that memory with me into my marriage, a secret flame that kept me warm during the coldest years of duty." Isabel was stunned by this revelation from her always proper mother. "And Thomas, what became of him?" "He was assigned to a distant outpost, much like your Leonhardt. Over the years, I heard he distinguished himself in battle, rose through the ranks, even married eventually." A shadow crossed the Queen's face. "He died defending our borders 15 years ago. Your father awarded him posthumous honors, never knowing what he had once meant to me." "Did you ever see him again, after you married?" "Once," Eleanor admitted, "at a tournament, years later. Our eyes met across the field, and in that moment, it was as if no time had passed. But we both had made our choices, built our lives. We exchanged no words, only a glance that said everything." She squeezed Isabel's hand. "I tell you this not to encourage defiance, daughter, but to help you understand. Duty and desire aren't always separate paths. Sometimes they can run together if one is clever enough, patient enough." Isabel absorbed her mother's words, turning them over in her mind. "Are you suggesting I should, before the wedding?" "I'm suggesting nothing specific," the Queen replied carefully. "Only that there are moments in a woman's life, even a princess's life, when she must decide what memories she wishes to carry into her future, what regrets she can live with, and which would destroy her." She paused, her expression growing more serious. "But understand this. Whatever choices you make carry consequences. I was fortunate. Others have not been so lucky." "And father?" Isabel asked. "Did you ever come to love him?" Eleanor's expression softened. "Yes, though not in the same burning way I loved Thomas. Your father and I built something different, a partnership, a friendship that deepened over years of ruling together, raising you together. It's a quieter love, but no less real." They sat in silence for a moment, the garden growing darker as twilight faded into true evening. In the distance, a nightingale began to sing. "I have another question," Isabel said finally. "A different one." "Ask it. Why does father hate Leonhardt so much? The punishment seems excessive for what happened." The Queen sighed. "It's complicated. Your father doesn't hate Sir Leonhardt. Quite the opposite. He has always held him in the highest esteem. But what?" "But Leonhardt is a living reminder of a painful chapter in your father's life," Eleanor said carefully. "A reminder of mistakes made, of roads not taken. And now, seeing him with you." She shook her head. "I've said too much." Isabel frowned, sensing there was more to the story than her mother was revealing. "You're speaking in riddles, Mother." "Some secrets are not mine to tell," Eleanor replied firmly. "But know this. Your father's harshness toward Leonhardt comes from fear as much as anger. Fear of history repeating itself in ways you cannot yet understand." Before Isabel could press further, a rustling in the nearby hedge announced the approach of someone else. Both women fell silent as Lady Beatrice appeared at the entrance to their secluded spot. "Forgive the intrusion, Your Majesties," she said with a deep curtsy. "But Duke Alvermont has arrived unexpectedly and requests an audience with the princess." Isabel felt her heart sink. "At this hour?" "He claims it is a matter of some urgency, Princess." Queen Eleanor and Isabel exchanged a glance. "Very well," Isabel said, rising. "Tell him I shall receive him in the small audience chamber shortly." After Lady Beatrice had departed, Isabel turned back to her mother. "We haven't finished our conversation." "Perhaps we have, for now," the Queen replied, also standing. "Think on what I've told you, Isabel. And remember, even when cages seem complete, there are always spaces between the bars. It's finding those spaces that requires courage." With that cryptic advice, the Queen embraced her daughter briefly, then swept away through the darkening garden, leaving Isabel with more questions than answers. The small audience chamber was intimate by royal standards. A circular room with a domed ceiling painted with scenes from Eldoria's history, comfortable seating arranged before a crackling hearth, and only 2 guards stationed at the door rather than the usual 6. It was where the royal family received favored visitors or conducted private business, designed to convey both privilege and warmth. Duke Radcliffe of Alvermont, however, seemed to bring his own chill into the room. He stood by the hearth, yet somehow absorbed its heat rather than reflecting it, his tall, lean frame silhouetted against the flames, his shadow stretching long across the polished floor. "My Lord Duke," Isabel greeted him formally as she entered. "This is an unexpected pleasure." Radcliffe turned, his thin lips curving into what passed for a smile. "Princess Isabel, forgive the late hour, but I found myself unable to wait until morning to speak with you." "What matter could be so urgent?" she asked, maintaining a polite distance. "Our future, of course." He gestured to a chair. "Please sit. I've brought something for you." Reluctantly, Isabel seated herself, arranging her skirts with deliberate care to avoid meeting his eyes for longer than necessary. Radcliffe withdrew a small velvet box from inside his doublet and opened it to reveal a ring, a massive ruby surrounded by diamonds, set in heavy gold. "The betrothal ring of Alvermont," he explained, extending it toward her. "Worn by the Duchess for 12 generations. I thought it time you should have it, as symbol of our approaching union." Isabel stared at the ring, its blood-red stone gleaming ominously in the firelight. "It's impressive," she managed. "It is," Radcliffe agreed, seemingly oblivious to her lack of enthusiasm. "And now, with your permission." He moved to take her hand. Isabel steeled herself, fighting the instinct to pull away as he slipped the heavy ring onto her finger. It felt cold and constraining, the weight of it unfamiliar and unwelcome. "A perfect fit," the Duke declared, looking satisfied, "as I believe our marriage will be." "You are confident in that assessment, my lord?" Isabel asked, unable to keep a slight edge from her voice. Radcliffe's eyes narrowed. "I am, despite our unusual beginning." "You refer to the incident with Sir Leonhart?" "I do." The Duke moved to pour 2 goblets of wine from a decanter that had been set on a side table. "A regrettable situation, but one that has been adequately addressed." He handed her a goblet. "The knight has been removed to a post where he can do no further damage, and our wedding plans proceed apace. All is as it should be." Isabel took a small sip of wine, using the moment to compose herself. "And is that how you view marriage, my lord? As something that should proceed as it should be?" "Marriage is an alliance, princess," Radcliffe replied coolly. "Particularly among those of our station. It is about joining lands, resources, bloodlines. Emotions are secondary considerations at best. And what of compatibility, mutual respect, perhaps even affection?" The Duke's lips quirked in amusement. "Those may come in time, if we are fortunate, but they are not prerequisites." He studied her over the rim of his goblet. "You have romantic notions, princess. Understandable, perhaps, given your sheltered upbringing. But in the world beyond castle walls, such notions are luxuries few can afford." "And love?" Isabel challenged, emboldened by her earlier conversation with her mother. "Is that too a luxury?" Radcliffe's expression hardened. "Love is a poet's fantasy, princess, a pleasant fiction told to maidens and children. Real power comes from advantageous connections, from strategic thinking." He leaned closer. "Our union will create the strongest alliance in the northern kingdoms. Our children will rule lands greater than either Eldoria or Alvermont alone. That is worth far more than fleeting sentiment." Isabel held his gaze. "And if I told you my heart belongs to another?" A dangerous glint appeared in the Duke's eyes. "I would say that hearts, like all other possessions, can change ownership when circumstances demand it." His voice remained level, but there was an undercurrent of menace that raised the hairs on the back of Isabel's neck. "Besides, this knight who has so captured your imagination is gone. In time he will be forgotten." "By whom?" Isabel asked quietly. "By everyone who matters." Radcliffe set down his wine and moved to stand behind her chair, his hands coming to rest on her shoulders. Not roughly, but with a possessive weight that made her skin crawl. "You are to be the Duchess of Alvermont, Princess Isabel, future queen of our united lands. Such a position requires your complete focus and loyalty. She fought the urge to shrug off his touch. And what does such a position offer in return, my lord? Power, he said simply. Influence, security. The knowledge that your children will inherit a dynasty. His fingers tightened slightly. And my protection, of course. In a world full of threats, that is no small consideration. The implied threat was clear enough. Isabel rose smoothly from her chair, forcing him to release her. It grows late, Duke Alvermont, and I find myself suddenly fatigued. He bowed, though his eyes remained cold. Of course, Princess, we will have a lifetime for further conversations after our wedding. He reached for her hand, pressing a dry kiss to her knuckles, just where Leonhardt's lips had touched days earlier. The contrast could not have been more stark. Dream well, my future bride. After he had gone, Isabel stood motionless in the center of the room, staring at the gaudy ring on her finger. It felt like a shackle, the first link in a chain that would bind her to a man who viewed her as nothing more than a valuable acquisition. Her mother's words echoed in her mind. There are moments in a woman's life when she must decide what memories she wishes to carry into her future, what regrets she can live with, and which would destroy her. With sudden resolution, Isabel called for Lady Beatrice. I wish to visit the Queen's chambers, she said when her lady-in-waiting appeared. Immediately. 20 minutes later, Isabel was seated in her mother's private sitting room, the two of them alone save for a single trusted handmaiden who stood at a discreet distance. I've decided, Isabel announced without preamble. I cannot marry the Duke without first... She hesitated, then continued with determination, without first seeing Leonhardt once more. I need closure, at the very least. Queen Eleanor studied her daughter's face, her expression unreadable. Frostwatch Keep is a 7-day ride north through difficult terrain. The wedding is in less than a month. What you suggest is nearly impossible, not to mention dangerous. I'm not asking permission, Mother, Isabel said quietly. I'm asking for help. A tense silence fell between them. Finally, the Queen sighed. There is a hunting lodge, 3 days north by the swiftest horse. It belongs to the crown but is rarely used except during autumn hunts. She glanced at her handmaiden, then back to Isabel. A message could be sent to redirect a certain traveler to this lodge for inspection of the property. Isabel's heart began to race. And I might inspect it as well? For potential renovation? A princess concerned with the state of royal properties would hardly raise eyebrows. The Queen agreed, particularly if accompanied by suitable guards and attendants, handpicked for their discretion. Hope, dangerous and wild, flared in Isabel's chest. When? 3 days hence. Any sooner would appear suspicious in light of the Duke's arrival. Queen Eleanor rose and moved to a writing desk, where she quickly penned a note. This will go north with our fastest courier tonight. What happens after that? She sealed the note with wax, pressing her signet ring into it. Will be entirely your choice, daughter. Isabel embraced her mother, tears of gratitude stinging her eyes. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, the Queen cautioned, her expression grave. What I'm enabling carries great risk. To you, to him, to the stability of our kingdom. If you are discovered... I understand the consequences, Isabel assured her. But I also understand the consequences of a lifetime of regret. I've made my choice. As she returned to her chambers that night, the Duke's ring heavy on her finger, but her heart suddenly lighter, Isabel felt something she had not experienced since before that fateful night in the garden. Hope. Not for a fairy tale ending. She was too practical for that, but for a moment of truth and choice before duty claimed her forever. 3 days. 3 days until she would see Leonhardt again, perhaps for the last time. 3 days to prepare herself for whatever might follow, be it a memory to sustain her through the years ahead, or a more desperate plan. Either way, she would meet her fate on her own terms. The thought sustained her as she drifted into sleep, dreams of northern forests and a knight's embrace replacing the nightmares that had plagued her since his departure. Dawn had barely broken over the eastern hills when Princess Isabel's small entourage departed Eldoria Castle. A light mist hung in the air, shrouding their departure in a ghostly veil that suited the secretive nature of their journey. Isabel rode at the center of the group, flanked by 4 royal guards hand-selected by the Queen for their loyalty and discretion. Lady Beatrice and 2 younger handmaidens followed close behind, along with a small wagon carrying provisions and necessities for their supposed inspection of the hunting lodge. They rode north along the King's Road, the powerful horses making good time despite the weight of their riders and gear. Isabel sat tall in her saddle, dressed in a practical riding habit of deep green wool, her hair braided and coiled beneath a matching cap. She had left the Duke's gaudy ruby ring locked in a small chest in her chambers, a deliberate choice that felt like her first small act of rebellion. By midday, the mist had burned away under the spring sun, revealing rolling countryside dotted with small villages and farms. Peasants paused in their fieldwork to bow or curtsy as the royal party passed, their curious eyes following the unexpected procession. "We're attracting more attention than I'd hoped," Isabel murmured to Lady Beatrice as they passed through a larger settlement where a small crowd had gathered to watch them. "It cannot be helped, Your Highness," the older woman replied. "A princess traveling the northern road is hardly an everyday sight. Still, most will assume you journey to inspect the border garrisons, as your father sometimes does. Let us hope the Duke assumes the same, should word reach him," Isabel said, unable to suppress a shiver at the thought of Radcliffe discovering her true purpose. Lady Beatrice studied her mistress with shrewd eyes. "The Duke departed for his own lands yesterday, to begin preparations for the wedding and your eventual residence there. He is not expected to return to Eldoria for at least a fortnight." Relief washed over Isabel. "Mother didn't mention that." "Her Majesty thought it best you focus on the journey ahead, not on what or who you leave behind," Beatrice said diplomatically. They rode in silence for a while, the steady rhythm of hoofbeats on packed earth almost hypnotic. Villages gave way to denser forests as they traveled farther north, the road narrowing and the air growing cooler beneath the canopy of ancient oaks and towering pines. "May I speak freely, Princess?" Lady Beatrice asked suddenly, urging her horse closer to Isabel's. "When have you ever needed permission, old friend?" Isabel replied with a small smile. "True enough." The lady-in-waiting's weathered face creased with concern. "I've served you since you were a babe in arms. I changed your swaddling cloths, dried your tears, celebrated your triumphs. I love you as if you were my own daughter." "And I love you as a second mother," Isabel assured her. "Then heed me now, child. This path you walk is perilous, not just politically, but for your heart." Beatrice's voice dropped lower, ensuring none of the others could hear. "I know why we journey north. The Queen may have spoken of inspections and royal properties, but I am not so easily fooled." Isabel tensed. "And what do you believe our purpose to be?" "You seek the knight, Sir Leonhart." It wasn't a question. "The man who looks at you as if you hung the moon and stars." "And if I do?" Beatrice sighed deeply. "Then I fear for you both. Love between a princess and a common knight, even one of his standing, rarely ends happily in the real world, whatever the minstrels may sing." "Leonhart is more than a common knight," Isabel said defensively. "Perhaps," Beatrice conceded, "but he is still a man without lands or titles significant enough to challenge a match with Alvermont. What do you hope to accomplish by this meeting? A final farewell? Or something more reckless?" The question pierced Isabel's carefully maintained composure. What did she hope for? She had told herself it was closure, a chance to say a proper goodbye before duty claimed her forever. But in the secret chambers of her heart, didn't she yearn for more? For a miracle? A way out? A path they could walk together? "I don't know," she admitted softly. "I only know I must see him once more before I give myself to a man who views me as nothing more than a political advantage." Beatrice's expression softened with understanding. "Then I shall pray for your happiness, whatever form it may take, and know that my loyalty is to you first, Princess, not to the crown, not to the Duke, but to the child I have loved these 38 years." Isabel reached across the space between their horses to squeeze the older woman's hand. "Thank you. That means more than you know." They made camp that night in a small clearing just off the main road, the guards establishing a perimeter while the handmaidens set up a modest tent for the princess. After a simple meal of bread, cheese, and dried fruit, Isabel retreated to her tent, but sleep eluded her. Every cracking twig, every rustle of leaves in the night breeze, had her heart racing with a mixture of anticipation and dread. What if the Queen's messenger hadn't reached Leonhardt? What if he had already arrived at Frostwatch, too far to turn back? What if he had received the message but chosen not to come, recognizing the danger such a meeting posed to them both? Worse still, what if he came, but the sight of him only confirmed what she already knew, that their love, however real, was impossible in the world they inhabited. Dawn found her hollow-eyed but resolute. They broke camp quickly and continued north, the terrain growing more rugged as they ascended into the foothills that marked the boundary between Eldoria's fertile lowlands and the harsher northern territories. By late afternoon of the third day, the hunting lodge came into view, a sturdy structure of stone and timber nestled against the side of a forested hill. Smoke curled from its chimney, signaling that someone had arrived ahead of them to prepare for their coming. Isabel's heart leapt into her throat. Had Leonhardt received the message? Was he already here? As they approached, the lodge's heavy wooden door swung open. But it was not Leonhardt who emerged, but an elderly caretaker who bowed deeply as the princess dismounted. "Your Highness," the man said, his voice creaking with age, "we received word of your visit. All has been prepared according to Her Majesty's instructions." Disappointment crashed through Isabel, though she maintained her composed exterior. "Thank you, good sir. My party will require accommodation for 2 nights. "Of course, Princess. The main chamber has been prepared for you, and there are sufficient rooms for your attendants." As the guards unloaded the wagon and the handmaidens bustled about, arranging Isabel's belongings in the master chamber, she wandered the lodge restlessly. It was a handsome building, well constructed and comfortable in a rustic way, with massive stone fireplaces, sturdy furniture crafted from local timber, and walls adorned with hunting trophies from her ancestors' expeditions. Under different circumstances, she might have found it charming. Now, each passing hour without sign of Leonhardt only increased her anxiety. Night fell, and still there was no word, no sign. Isabel picked at her dinner, unable to eat despite the caretaker's wife's evident pride in the venison stew she had prepared. After excusing herself, she stood at the window of her chamber, staring out at the moonlit forest, trying to quell the growing fear that he would not come. "Princess?" Lady Beatrice's voice came softly from the doorway. "You should rest. The journey has been taxing." "He isn't coming, is he?" Isabel asked, not turning from the window. Beatrice approached, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "The roads are unpredictable, the weather changeable. If he received the message, he will come. And if he didn't, then this journey will still have served its purpose, giving you time away from court, from wedding preparations, from the Duke's cold gaze," Beatrice pointed out practically. "A moment to breathe and gather your strength for what lies ahead." Isabel nodded absently, though her heart refused to accept such a meager consolation. After Beatrice had helped her undress and settle into the large bed with its thick furs and woolen blankets, she lay awake, listening to the wind whistling through the trees outside and the occasional howl of a distant wolf. She must have drifted into an uneasy sleep eventually, for she was startled awake by a sound she couldn't immediately identify, a soft rap on the lodge's main door, barely audible over the crackling of the fire that had been banked for the night. Sitting upright, Isabel strained to listen. Had she imagined it? But no, there it came again, slightly louder this time. Moving silently, she slipped from the bed and wrapped a heavy woolen shawl around her nightgown. The floorboards were cold beneath her bare feet as she padded through the darkened lodge, guided by the dim glow of embers from the main hearth. One of her guards, a young man named Thomas, was already at the door, one hand on the hilt of his sword as he called out, "Who comes to the Royal Lodge at this hour?" The reply came in a voice that sent a shock of recognition through Isabel's entire body. "A traveler seeking shelter from the night. I was told the lodge might accommodate one more weary soul. Leonhardt." Isabel stepped forward, her heart thundering in her chest. "Open the door, Thomas. This traveler is expected." The guard glanced at her uncertainly but obeyed, lifting the heavy wooden bar and pulling the door open to reveal a tall figure silhouetted against the night sky. Leonhardt stood on the threshold, travel-worn and dusty, his cloak damp from a recent rainfall. His eyes found Isabel's immediately, and the naked emotion in them stole her breath. "Princess," he said formally, bowing his head, "forgive the late hour of my arrival." "Sir Leonhardt," she replied, struggling to keep her voice steady. "Your timing is impeccable. We had almost given up hope of your joining our inspection tour." Thomas looked between them, his expression carefully neutral. As one of the Queen's hand-picked guards, he understood his role was to see nothing, hear nothing that might compromise the princess. "I'll return to my post, Your Highness," he said with a slight bow. "Unless you require anything further." "No, thank you, Thomas. You may go." After the guard had retreated to his position near the lodge entrance, Isabel and Leonhardt stood in silence, the space between them charged with unspoken feelings. "You came," she finally whispered, allowing her formal mask to slip now that they were relatively alone. "Did you doubt I would?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "The roads are dangerous. The message might not have reached you in time. I would have crawled through hell itself to reach you, Isabel," he said simply. The use of her name without title, something he had rarely allowed himself before, broke something loose inside her. Without thinking of consequences or propriety, she crossed the space between them and threw her arms around him, burying her face against his chest. His arms encircled her after only a moment's hesitation, strong and sure, holding her as if she were something infinitely precious. "I thought I'd never see you again," she murmured against the rough fabric of his tunic. "As did I," he admitted, his chin resting atop her head. "When the Queen's messenger found me on the northern road and delivered her coded instructions, I could scarcely believe it. I turned my horse around that very moment." Isabel pulled back slightly to look up at him, drinking in the sight of his face, the strong jaw, the kind eyes, the scar that traced his left cheekbone from some long-ago battle. "You risked much to come here." "As did you," he countered. "Perhaps more." The reality of their situation began to intrude upon the joy of reunion. Isabel stepped back, though reluctantly. "We should not stand here in the open. Come, there is wine by the fire, and you must be hungry after your journey." She led him to the main hearth, where embers still glowed red in the massive fireplace. After stoking the fire back to life and pouring 2 goblets of wine from a decanter on the sideboard, she sat beside him on a bench drawn close to the warmth. "How long can you stay?" Leonhardt asked, accepting the wine gratefully. "We're to return to Eldoria the day after tomorrow," Isabel replied. "The Duke believes I am inspecting northern properties. He himself has returned to Alvermont to begin preparations for the wedding," Leonhardt finished when she faltered. "When is it to be?" 3 weeks hence." She twisted her hands in her lap. "The preparations have already begun. My gown, the feast, the ceremonies, all arranged with an efficiency that would be admirable if it weren't so suffocating. And there is no way to delay, to reconsider?" She shook her head sadly. "The alliance is too valuable to the kingdom. My father has made that abundantly clear. And the Duke—" She shivered despite the fire's warmth. "He sees me as a possession to be acquired, a broodmare for his heirs, a route to power through our joined bloodlines." Leonhardt's jaw tightened, his free hand clenching into a fist. "He is unworthy of you. Yet he will have me nonetheless." The bitterness in her voice surprised even her. "Unless—" Leonhardt began, then stopped. "Unless what?" He set down his wine, untouched, and turned to face her fully. "Why did you ask me to come here, Isabel? Was it merely to say goodbye properly? Or was there something more you hoped for?" The directness of the question caught her off guard. What had she hoped for? A miracle? An escape? Or simply one perfect memory to sustain her through the cold years ahead? "I don't know," she admitted. "I only knew I could not face a lifetime with him without seeing you once more, without telling you, face to face, what you mean to me." "And what is that?" he asked softly, his eyes intent on hers. Isabel took a deep breath, gathering her courage. You are the only man I have ever loved, the only one I will ever love, no matter what vows I am forced to speak in 3 weeks' time. My heart has made its choice, and it chooses you, now and always." Leonhardt reached out slowly, cupping her face with a gentleness that belied his warrior's strength. "And mine has chosen you since I first saw the woman you had become, not just the princess everyone else sees." He leaned forward, and this time there was no whine, no confusion, no excuse, but the simple, overwhelming need to bridge the space between them. Their lips met in a kiss that began tenderly but quickly deepened with all the longing of their separation. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Leonhardt rested his forehead against hers. "We could leave," he whispered. "Tonight. Now. Ride east to the coast. Find passage on a ship bound for distant shores. Start anew where no one knows a princess or a knight. Only a man and woman who choose each other." For one dizzying moment, Isabel allowed herself to imagine it. Freedom, love, a life built together far from politics and duty. The vision was so sweet it made her heart ache. "And the cost?" she asked, though she already knew. "War, most likely," he admitted reluctantly. "Alvermont would take your disappearance as an insult to be answered with blood. Your father would have no choice but to defend the kingdom. Thousands would die. And my parents would forever bear the shame of a daughter who abandoned her people for selfish desires," Isabel added softly. "Even if they understood, they could never forgive such a betrayal." The fire crackled in the silence that followed, shadows dancing across their troubled faces. The dream of escape dissolved between them, beautiful but impossible. "Then what remains for us?" Leonhardt asked finally, his voice raw with emotion. Isabel thought of her mother's words. There are moments in a woman's life when she must decide what memories she wishes to carry into her future. She understood now what Eleanor had been offering, not an escape from duty, but a treasure to sustain her through it. "We have tonight," she said simply, "and tomorrow. 2 days to create memories that neither time nor duty can erase. 2 days to love freely before we each return to the paths laid out for us. And after? After, we endure," she whispered. "We live in the hope that someday, somehow, the world might change enough to allow us together. And if it doesn't," she squeezed his hand, "we will have had this. More than many ever know in a lifetime." Leonhardt's eyes shone with unshed tears as he gazed at her. "You would have made a magnificent queen," he said softly. "Not just beautiful and kind, but wise beyond measure." "I still may be queen one day," she reminded him, "just not the one I would have chosen to be." He kissed her again, more urgently this time. "Then let us not waste a moment of what time we have," he murmured against her lips. As they sat entwined before the fire, the night deepening around them, Isabel felt a strange peace settle alongside her sadness. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, its own choices. But tonight was theirs alone, a stolen treasure in a world determined to keep them apart. Dawn broke over the hunting lodge in a gentle wash of pale gold light. Isabel stood at the window of her chamber, watching as the forest awakened. Birds calling to one another in the mist-shrouded trees, a deer and her fawn stepping delicately from the underbrush to drink at a nearby stream. The world seemed suspended in a perfect moment of tranquility, utterly disconnected from the turmoil in her heart. Behind her, Leonhardt still slept, his powerful form sprawled across the bed they had shared through the night. In repose, the hardness of the warrior softened, making him look younger, more vulnerable. She studied him with hungry eyes, committing every detail to memory, the curve of his shoulder, the slight furrow between his brows, the way his dark hair fell across his forehead. Last night had been everything she had dreamed of and more. After their conversation by the fire, they had retreated to her chamber, where Lady Beatrice had tactfully arranged for them to be undisturbed. What followed had been a passionate, tender exploration of each other, both physical and emotional. For those precious hours, titles and duties had fallen away, leaving only a man and woman discovering the depths of their connection. Now, in the unforgiving light of morning, reality began to reassert itself. In just over a day, they would part, she to her gilded cage, he to his frozen exile. What they had shared would become a secret memory, hidden from a world that would condemn them for it. As if sensing her thoughts, Leonhardt stirred, his eyes opening to find her by the window. He smiled, a gentle expression that transformed his usually grave features. "I feared I had dreamed you," he said, his voice rough with sleep. "No dream," she assured him, moving back to sit on the edge of the bed. "Though perhaps a reprieve from our waking lives." He reached up to touch her face, tracing the curve of her cheek with calloused fingertips. "If this is all we are granted, it is more than I dared hope for, and yet less than we deserve," she replied with a sad smile. Leonhardt sat up, the blankets pooling around his waist to reveal a torso marked with the scars of battles fought for Eldoria. He took her hands in his expression growing serious. "What happens when we leave this place, Isabel? Can you truly marry him, knowing what we've found together?" She sighed, the weight of duty settling back onto her shoulders. "What choice do I have? My father has made it clear. The alliance with Alvermont is essential for Eldoria's security. Thousands of lives depend on this marriage." "And what of your life?" Leonhardt pressed. "Does it count for nothing in this equation?" "My life has never been my own," she said simply. "From the moment of my birth, I have belonged to Eldoria first, to myself second, if at all." Leonhardt's jaw tightened. "There must be another way to secure the alliance. Another path that doesn't require sacrificing your happiness. If there is, neither my father nor his advisors have found it." She withdrew her hands from his and stood, moving restlessly around the chamber. "Alvermont controls the mountain passes to the east, our most vulnerable border. Without this alliance, Duke Radcliffe could align himself with Northumbria, cutting off our trade routes and exposing us to invasion." "And so you are the price of peace," Leonhardt said bitterly. "A living tribute to appease a man who sees you only as a means to greater power." "It has ever been the fate of royal daughters," Isabel replied, though without self-pity. "My mother endured it, her mother before her, generations of women married for advantage rather than affection." "And were they happy?" he challenged. "Did they find peace in their sacrifice?" Isabel thought of her mother's confession. The night she had loved, the night she had claimed for herself before surrendering to duty. Some found contentment in time, others merely endured. "And which do you expect for yourself?" She turned back to face him, her expression resolute. "I will not merely endure, Leonhardt. I will find purpose in my position, use what influence I gain to improve the lives of Eldoria's people. If I cannot have love in my marriage, I will at least have meaning in my work." He rose from the bed, wrapping a blanket around his waist as he came to stand before her. "You speak as if our love must end when we leave this place." "Doesn't it?" she asked softly. "You will be at Frostwatch, I at Alvermont. Hundreds of miles and insurmountable barriers between us." "Distance can be crossed," he said, taking her hands again. "Barriers can be overcome. I may be exiled from court, but I am still a knight of the realm, still able to move within its borders." Hope flickered dangerously in Isabel's heart. "What are you suggesting?" "That this need not be our only meeting," Leonhardt replied, his blue eyes intense. "That we might find ways to see each other, rarely perhaps, but enough to sustain us, enough to keep hope alive." "You speak of treason," she whispered, "of adultery, of risks that could cost us both our lives if discovered." "I speak of refusing to surrender what we have found," he countered. "Of claiming moments of truth in lives otherwise bound by duty and obligation." The idea was both terrifying and intoxicating. To maintain their connection, even after her marriage, to steal moments together over the years, building a secret life alongside her public one. It was dangerous, perhaps even foolish, but in that moment, Isabel could not bring herself to reject it outright. "Even if it were possible," she said cautiously, "how would we manage it? The Duke will keep me closely watched, especially in the early years of our marriage." "Leave that to me," Leonhardt said. "I have friends still loyal to me, connections throughout the kingdom. We would need to be patient, careful, but it could be done." Before she could respond, A soft knock came at the door. Both froze, but it was only Lady Beatrice's voice that called through the thick wood. "Princess, breakfast awaits in the main hall when you are ready, and perhaps Sir Leon Hart would care to join the hunting party this morning. The men are preparing now." The mundane normality of the request, as if they were simply guests enjoying a country retreat, struck Isabel as almost comical in its incongruity. "Thank you, Beatrice," she called back. "We shall join you shortly." After the sound of footsteps retreated, Leon Hart gave a wry smile. "Your lady-in-waiting is remarkably accommodating." "She loves me," Isabel said simply, "and she understands what it means to choose duty over heart. She lost her own love to war many years ago, before she ever had the chance to tell him how she felt. I think she wishes to spare me that particular regret." They dressed in companionable silence, helping each other with the more complicated fastenings of their garments. There was an intimacy to it that touched Isabel deeply, this simple domestic act that ordinary couples performed every day without thought, but which they might never share again. In the main hall, a hearty breakfast had been laid out. Fresh bread, preserved fruits, smoked meats, and hot porridge sweetened with honey. The guards and handmaidens were already eating, though they rose respectfully when Isabel and Leon Hart entered. "Sir Leon Hart has graciously agreed to lead a hunting party this morning," Isabel announced, maintaining the pretense of their gathering. "I would welcome fresh game for our table tonight." "It would be my honor, Princess," Leon Hart replied with formal courtesy, though his eyes held a warmth visible only to her. After breakfast, the men prepared for the hunt, while Isabel and her handmaidens made a show of inspecting the lodge's furnishings and structural elements, noting repairs needed before the autumn hunting season. It was all an elaborate charade, of course, but one that gave a veneer of legitimacy to their presence should questions arise later. When the hunting party had departed, Leon Hart leading the 4 guards deeper into the forest in search of deer or boar, Isabel found herself alone with Lady Beatrice in the lodge's small herb garden. "You love him," Beatrice said without preamble, her tone making it a statement rather than a question. "Yes," Isabel admitted, seeing no point in denying what must be obvious to the woman who knew her best. "And he loves you." Again, not a question. "Yes." Lady Beatrice sighed. Her weathered face creased with concern. "What happens when you return to Eldoria, to the Duke and his expectations?" "I will do my duty," Isabel replied, running her fingers absently along the stems of rosemary growing in a clay pot. "I will marry Radcliffe, secure the alliance, be the princess and eventually duchess that Eldoria needs me to be." "And Sir Leon Hart?" Isabel hesitated, unsure how much to confide even in this most trusted confidant. "He returns to his posting at Frostwatch." "That is not what I asked," Beatrice said gently. "What becomes of your feelings for each other? Do they simply end when you part?" "They cannot end," Isabel admitted. "Not for me. I will carry them with me always, even as I fulfill my obligations to the crown and to Alvermont." Beatrice studied her closely. "Be careful, child. The Duke is not a forgiving man, nor one to overlook any slight to his pride. If he ever suspected—" "He won't," Isabel assured her, though the confidence in her voice exceeded that in her heart. "What happened here will remain between those present, all of whom I trust with my life." Lady Beatrice nodded slowly. "My loyalty is to you, Princess, always, but I would not see you hurt, or worse, for moments of happiness, however precious they may be." The older woman's concern touched Isabel deeply. "I know, dear friend, and I value your wisdom and protection more than I can express." A comfortable silence fell between them as they continued through the garden, each lost in her own thoughts. The hunting party returned successful in late afternoon, bringing 2 deer that would provide ample meat for their evening meal and for the journey back to Eldoria the following day. Leon Hart looked invigorated by the physical exertion, his face flushed from the forest air, his movements fluid with the confidence of a man in his natural element. "The princess should see the view from Hawk's Ridge," he suggested as the game was being prepared for the evening meal. "It affords a spectacular perspective of the northern territories." "An excellent idea," Isabel agreed readily, understanding the unspoken request for time alone together. Lady Beatrice, would you prepare my riding cloak? Within the hour, they were on horseback, riding side by side along a narrow trail that wound up through the forest toward higher ground. 2 guards followed at a discreet distance, close enough to intervene if danger threatened, far enough to allow private conversation. Your men are skilled hunters, Isabel commented as they rode. Thomas especially has a keen eye for tracking. They are good men, Leonhardt agreed. Loyal to the crown, but also understanding of certain situations. You mean they're willing to pretend they don't notice what's happening between us? He smiled slightly. They respect you, Princess, and they've served with me long enough to know my character. They will protect both your safety and your reputation with their lives. They reached a clearing near the summit of a high ridge, where the trees opened to reveal a breathtaking panorama of the northern lands. Forests stretched as far as the eye could see, broken occasionally by silver threads of rivers or the smoke from distant settlements. On the far horizon, the mountains that formed Eldoria's border with the neighboring kingdoms rose in majestic, snow-capped splendor. Dismounting, they approached the edge of the cliff together. The guards remained with the horses, allowing them this moment of privacy. I've always loved the north, Leonhardt said, gazing out over the wild landscape. There's a rawness to it, an honesty missing from court life. It's beautiful, Isabel agreed. Harsh, perhaps, but real. I can see why it calls to you. He turned to face her, the wind ruffling his dark hair. I meant what I said this morning, Isabel. This doesn't have to be our final goodbye. She met his gaze steadily. It's a beautiful dream, Leonhardt, but the risks are great, he acknowledged. But so is the cost of never seeing you again, of living with the knowledge that we surrendered without a fight. And if we're discovered? She pressed. If the Duke learns of us? Then I would face whatever consequences came, he said simply. I have lived by a code of honor my entire life, Isabel. That code now compels me to fight for what I believe in most, our love. His words resonated in her heart, awakening the same courage that had driven her to arrange this meeting in the first place. Was she truly willing to accept a lifetime without him? When alternatives, dangerous though they might be, existed, how would we communicate? She asked, taking a step toward practical considerations. Letters would be too risky. There are ways, he assured her. Coded messages through trusted intermediaries, signals understood only by us. We would need to be patient, careful, but it could be done. Isabel closed her eyes briefly, weighing duty against desire, safety against possibility. When she opened them again, her decision was made. Once a year, she said softly, if we can manage it safely without risking war or ruin. A day, perhaps 2, to remember who we truly are beneath the roles we must play. Joy blazed across Leonhardt's face, quickly tempered by solemn understanding of what she was proposing. Once a year, he agreed, taking her hands in his. On the spring equinox, when the world balances between seasons, we too shall find our balance. Where? She asked. There is a monastery in the eastern foothills, he replied. St. Adeline's. The abbot is an old friend who owes me his life twice over. He would provide sanctuary without questions. A holy place for an unholy meeting, Isabel observed with a touch of irony. There is nothing unholy about love freely given, Leonhardt countered. Whatever vows you must speak to the Duke, they cannot bind your heart where it does not wish to go. The wind picked up, sending her cloak billowing around them both like great wings. In that moment, perched on the edge of the cliff with the vast wilderness spread before them, Isabel felt both terrified and exhilarated by the path they were choosing. Promise me one thing, she said, suddenly serious. If ever the risk becomes too great, if continuing would truly threaten your life or the stability of the kingdom, we end it. No heroic last stands, no dramatic gestures. We accept that our time has passed. I promise, he said solemnly, though it would take circumstances most dire to make me willingly relinquish what we've found. She reached up to touch his face, tracing the scar along his cheek. Then let us make the most of what time remains to us here. Tomorrow comes soon enough with all its duties and separations. As they stood together on the ridge, the kingdom spread out below them like a tapestry of possibilities. Isabel felt a curious peace settle alongside her resolve. The future still held heartache and challenge, but no longer did it seem an unbroken expanse of duty without joy. They had carved out a small space for themselves, dangerous perhaps, but theirs alone. The guards maintained their respectful distance as the princess and the knight stood wrapped in each other's arms, silhouetted against the vast northern sky, a moment of perfect unity before the world would force them apart once more. The great hall of Eldoria Castle was transformed for the judicial assembly. The usual long dining tables had been removed, replaced by tiered seating arranged in a semicircle facing the king's dais. Tapestries depicting famous trials and judgments from the kingdom's history hung from the stone walls, their vivid colors catching the light that streamed through the high stained glass windows. Every noble family in the realm had sent representatives, filling the hall with a sea of rich fabrics, glittering jewelry, and the low murmur of anticipation. This was to be no ordinary court session. It was to be Princess Isabel's formal trial of character before her wedding to Duke Radcliffe of Alvermont. Such proceedings were traditional before royal marriages, but usually a mere formality, a ceremonial affirmation of the bride's virtue and suitability. Today, however, an undercurrent of tension electrified the air. Rumors of the princess's northern journey with Sir Leonhart had spread despite efforts to contain them, transforming what should have been routine into something far more dramatic. Isabel waited in a small antechamber, dressed in a gown of Eldorian white and gold, her hair arranged in an elaborate coiffure that felt too tight against her scalp. A week had passed since her return from the hunting lodge, a week of avoiding her father's questioning gaze and the Duke's possessive one. A week of secret smiles when memories of Leonhart surfaced unexpectedly, followed by crushing reminders of their imminent, perhaps permanent, separation. "It is time, Your Highness," announced the royal chamberlain, appearing at the doorway with a solemn bow. Isabel nodded, squaring her shoulders and lifting her chin. Today would require every ounce of composure she possessed. The great doors swung open, and she walked into the hall alone, her steps measured and deliberate across the stone floor. The assembly rose as one, a rustle of fabric and clink of ceremonial weapons filling the vast space. At the dais, King Edmund sat on his throne, Queen Eleanor beside him on a slightly smaller seat. To the king's right stood Duke Radcliffe, resplendent in crimson and black, his thin lips curved in what might generously be called a smile. Most significantly and unexpectedly, Sir Leonhart stood to one side of the hall among the royal guards, his face carefully neutral. Their eyes met for the briefest moment as she passed, and though neither betrayed any emotion, Isabel felt the connection between them like a physical touch. "Princess Isabel of Eldoria," intoned the Lord Chancellor, an elderly man with a voice that carried surprising power. "You come before this assembly to affirm your character and virtue before your union with Duke Radcliffe of Alvermont, as is the custom of our land. Do you submit willingly to this examination?" "I do," Isabel replied clearly, her voice steady despite the knot of anxiety in her stomach. "Then be seated, and let those who would speak to your character come forward." Isabel took her place in a chair positioned at the center of the hall, facing the assembly. One by one, character witnesses approached, her childhood tutors speaking of her diligence and intelligence, ladies-in-waiting testifying to her kindness and decorum, even commoners she had helped during visits to the city, describing her compassion for their hardships. The proceedings moved smoothly until Lord Harwick, the conservative royal advisor who had been openly skeptical about Isabel since the incident with Leonhart, rose to address the assembly. "Your Majesty's noble lords and ladies," he began, his voice carrying a note of rehearsed concern. "While none can doubt the princess's many virtues, recent events demand closer examination. I speak of her unexpected journey to the northern hunting lodge, accompanied by a small party that included Sir Leonhart of Valgren, the very knight who had previously compromised her reputation." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Isabel's hands tightened imperceptibly in her lap, but her expression remained serene. "This journey," Harwick continued, undertaken with minimal notice and without the Duke's knowledge, raises questions that must be addressed before this union can proceed in good faith. King Edmund leaned forward, his brow furrowed. What questions precisely, Lord Harwick? The princess's inspection of royal properties is hardly unprecedented. The timing, Your Majesty, Harwick replied smoothly, and the unusual composition of her party. One might wonder at the purpose of including a knight formally censured and reassigned to Frostwatch Keep. Duke Radcliffe stirred, his cold eyes fixed on Isabel. I too find myself curious about this expedition, Your Majesty. As the princess's future husband, should I not have been informed of her intentions to travel north? Before the king could respond, Queen Eleanor spoke, her voice calm but edged with steel. The journey was undertaken at my request, Duke Alvermont. The Northern Lodge requires significant repairs before the autumn hunting season, and I wished for my daughter's assessment, as she has a keen eye for such matters. And Sir Leonhardt's presence? Pressed Harwick. Was coincidental, the Queen replied without hesitation. He was en route to his posting and was diverted temporarily to provide security expertise. As the northern forests can be dangerous, I selected the escort personally. Isabel kept her face carefully blank, grateful for her mother's skillful intervention. The Queen had clearly prepared for this line of questioning. I see, said Harwick, looking not entirely convinced. Then perhaps Sir Leonhardt himself might address the assembly. As a knight sworn to truth and honor, his account should put any concerns to rest. A tense silence fell over the hall. To question a princess directly would be inappropriate, but to call upon her escort was within the bounds of protocol. King Edmund glanced at his daughter, then at Leonhardt, before nodding his reluctant assent. Sir Leonhardt will answer, the king declared. All eyes turned to the knight as he stepped forward, his posture straight, his expression grave. He bowed first to the king and queen, then to Isabel, and finally, with visible restraint, to the duke. Sir Leonhardt, began Harwick, you were previously disciplined for removing the princess from court without proper authorization, an action that led to considerable scandal. Yet you found yourself once again in her company on this northern journey. What explanation can you offer? Leonhardt met Harwick's gaze steadily. I was indeed en route to Frostwatch Keep to assume my new posting when I received orders from the Queen to provide temporary escort to the royal party. As a knight of the realm, I serve at the pleasure of the crown. It was not my place to question Her Majesty's commands. And during this journey, Harwick continued, did you at any time find yourself alone with the princess? A dangerous question. Isabel felt her heart begin to race, though her outward calm never wavered. The princess was attended at all times by her ladies, Leonhardt replied carefully. As for myself, I led the hunting parties and conducted security assessments of the lodge and surrounding lands. Any interactions between us were proper and befitting our respective stations. It was not strictly speaking a lie. Lady Beatrice had indeed been present in the lodge, even if she had tactfully remained distant. The hunting parties had been real, the security assessments conducted, yet the careful phrasing concealed the deeper truth of what had passed between them. Duke Radcliffe leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. You were once known as the most honest knight in Eldoria, Sir Leonhardt, sworn never to speak falsehood, even when truth was painful. Do you maintain that oath today? I do, my lord, Leonhardt replied without hesitation. Then answer plainly. Do you harbor feelings for Princess Isabel that exceed the loyalty owed by a knight to his sovereign's daughter? The question hung in the air like a drawn blade. Isabel's breath caught in her throat. This was the trap. To either lie and break his sacred oath, or confess and confirm the suspicions against them both. Leonhardt's eyes flickered briefly to Isabel before returning to the Duke's cold gaze. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but carried to every corner of the silent hall. My Lord Duke, I have served the crown of Eldoria for 20 years. I have bled for this kingdom, killed for it, would die for it without hesitation. He paused, choosing his next words with excruciating care. My admiration for Princess Isabel is no secret, nor should it be. She embodies the finest qualities of her lineage. Courage, compassion, wisdom beyond her years, Any knight worthy of his spurs would hold her in the highest esteem. You evade the question, the Duke said flatly. I answer it as it deserves to be answered, Leonhardt countered, a dangerous edge entering his voice. The princess's character is beyond reproach, her virtue unassailable. If your intention is to cast doubt upon either, I suggest you consider carefully what such accusations reveal about your own character, my lord. Gasps rippled through the assembly. To challenge a duke so directly was unprecedented, especially from a knight already under censure. King Edmund rose abruptly. Enough of this. Sir Leonhardt speaks truly of my daughter's character, which is the purpose of this assembly. I will not have her virtue questioned based on innuendo and supposition. Nor I, added Queen Eleanor, also rising. The princess has been examined quite thoroughly enough. The Duke's face had darkened with anger, but he maintained his composure, offering a stiff bow to the royal couple. As your majesty's wish. I meant no disrespect to the princess. I seek only assurance that our union begins with complete clarity. Clarity has been provided, the king stated firmly. This examination is concluded. The marriage will proceed as planned in 2 weeks' time. Relief and despair warred within Isabel's heart. The immediate danger had passed, the accusations deflected, but the reality of her impending marriage remained unchanged. As the assembly began to disperse, she rose gracefully, accepting the formal congratulations of the nobles with practiced poise. Duke Radcliffe approached her last, taking her hand in his cold grip. A spirited defense, he murmured, his voice too low for others to hear. Your knight plays the game well. But games eventually end, princess, and winners take their prizes. Is that how you see me, my lord? She asked quietly. As a prize to be won? As a valuable acquisition, he corrected, his smile not reaching his eyes. One I intend to guard most carefully once you are mine. The implied threat was unmistakable. Before she could respond, he raised her hand to his lips, pressing a dry kiss to her knuckles before turning away. Isabel remained in the hall as it emptied, gathering her composure before returning to her chambers. Only when almost everyone had gone did she notice Leonhardt lingering by one of the massive pillars, his face half in shadow. With a quick glance to ensure they weren't observed, she crossed to him, maintaining a respectable distance but close enough to speak without being overheard. You should not have challenged him so directly, she said softly. He is not a man who forgets slights. I could not stand by and let him impugn your honor, Leonhardt replied, his voice equally low. Not when the truth is that you are the most honorable person I know. The truth, she echoed with a hint of sad irony. We have become adept at dancing around it, have we not? Speaking truth without revealing all is sometimes the highest form of honesty, he countered. I meant every word I said about your character. As did I when I promised to meet you in the spring, she whispered. Unless you've reconsidered the risk? His eyes softened, the stern knight giving way to the man who had held her through the night at the hunting lodge. Never. I would risk far more for much less than what we share. 2 weeks, she said, the words catching in her throat. And then I belong to Alvermont. Your hand, perhaps, he replied. Never your heart. A throat cleared discreetly nearby. They turned to find Lady Beatrice waiting at a respectful distance, her expression carefully neutral. Your Highness, the Queen requests your presence in her solar, she announced. Isabel nodded, then turned back to Leonhardt for one final word. When do you leave for Frostwatch? Tomorrow at dawn, he said. The king has granted me no further delays. Then this is goodbye, she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. Until spring. Until spring, he echoed, bowing formally. She turned away, following Lady Beatrice from the hall, every step an exercise in control as she left him standing alone in the shadows. Queen Eleanor was waiting in her private solar, a circular room at the top of the eastern tower that caught the afternoon sun. It was a feminine space filled with comfortable furnishings, delicate tapestries, and bowls of dried flower petals that perfumed the air. Here, away from the formality of court, the queen could be simply a woman and a mother. You handled yourself well today, Eleanor said as Isabel entered. I was proud of your composure. Thank you for your intervention, Isabel replied, sinking into a chair opposite her mother. Without your explanation of the journey, things might have gone very differently. Harwick has always been a troublemaker, the Queen said dismissively. And the Duke, she frowned. His questions revealed more about his insecurities than about your actions. He suspects something, Isabel said quietly. He may not know exactly what happened at the lodge, but he senses enough to be dangerous. Men like Radcliffe always suspect others of the deceits they themselves would practice, Eleanor observed. But suspicion is not proof, and he cannot afford to alienate your father before the wedding. And after? Isabel couldn't keep the apprehension from her voice. The Queen's expression softened. After, you will be Duchess of Alvermont, with all the power and protection that title affords. He may be your husband, but he will not own you, Isabel. Remember that. I will try, she promised, though the Duke's warning still echoed in her mind. Once you are mine. There is something else we must discuss, Eleanor said, her tone becoming more serious. Something that could not be addressed in the public assembly. Isabel tensed. Yes? Sir Leonhardt's reassignment to Frostwatch Keep has been modified. The Queen watched her daughter's face carefully. He is instead being sent as an emissary to the court of Meridia, across the southern sea. Isabel felt as if the floor had dropped away beneath her. Meridia? But that's thousands of miles away. A journey of months, not days. Yes, the Queen confirmed. The official explanation is that we seek to strengthen our alliance with the Meridian monarchy and require our most trusted knight to represent Eldoria's interests. And the true reason? Isabel asked, already suspecting the answer. The Duke insisted. Eleanor said simply. As a condition of the marriage contract. He wants Leonhardt not just removed from court, but from the kingdom entirely. The cruel calculation of it struck Isabel like a physical blow. Frostwatch was remote, yes, but still within Eldoria's borders, still potentially accessible. Meridia might as well be another world. Does Leonhardt know? He was informed after the assembly, the Queen replied. He accepts the assignment with the grace one would expect of him. Isabel closed her eyes briefly, imagining his reaction to the news, the careful control he would have maintained, the stoic acceptance that was his hallmark while inside. Our agreement, she whispered, our plan to meet in the spring. It's impossible now. Plans can be adjusted, Eleanor said carefully. Meridia is not the end of the world, merely farther than anticipated, and ambassadorial duties eventually bring men home, even if only for brief periods. Hope flickered faintly in Isabel's heart. You think he will return to Eldoria someday? I think nothing is certain in this life except that it surprises us constantly, the Queen replied. For now, focus on the challenges immediately before you. The wedding, the transition to Alvermont, establishing yourself in your new role. And Leonhardt? Am I simply to forget him? Eleanor rose and moved to the window, gazing out over the kingdom she had helped rule for decades. When I was separated from the man I loved, she said quietly, I carried him here. She touched her heart. Not as a burden, but as a light to warm me through cold duties and lonely nights. You can do the same. Isabel joined her mother at the window. From this height, they could see the main road leading north from the castle, the road Leonhardt would take at dawn, beginning a journey that would carry him beyond her reach. I don't know if I have your strength, Mother, she admitted. Eleanor put an arm around her daughter's shoulders. You have more. You always have. Besides, she added with unexpected lightness, we women of Eldoria have a gift for patient endurance. The men who oppose us would do well to remember that. As the sun began its slow descent toward the western mountains, mother and daughter stood together in silent solidarity, watching the kingdom prepare for evening. Unaware that far below, in a hidden chamber off the armory, plans were already being laid that would change the course of all their lives. The Duke of Alvermont paced the length of his guest chambers, his boot heels clicking sharply against the stone floor. Though the room was among the finest in Eldoria Castle, spacious, well-appointed, with views of the royal gardens, he moved through it like a caged predator, his lean face set in lines of barely contained fury. "He humiliated me," Radcliffe seethed, addressing the only other occupant of the room, a slight silver-haired man seated calmly by the fire. "Before the entire court, that bastard knight all but called me a liar and a dishonorable man." "He did so artfully," observed Lord Mercer, the Duke's most trusted adviser, "without crossing the line into actual insult. Sir Leonhart has always been adept at navigating treacherous waters." "Treacherous indeed," the Duke agreed, pausing to pour himself a generous measure of brandy from a crystal decanter. "The question remains whether he navigates them alone, or with the princess as his co-conspirator." Mercer's thin lips curved in a humorless smile. "You still believe they are involved?" "I know it," Radcliffe said flatly. "The way they look at each other when they think no one notices. Her convenient journey north. His miraculous appearance at the same remote lodge." He tossed back the brandy in one swallow. "They mock me with their secret glances, their coded words." "Yet you have no proof," Mercer pointed out, "and the wedding proceeds in a week's time. Perhaps it would be wiser to let this perceived slight go unanswered. Once the princess is your wife, once she is my wife, she will learn what it means to belong to Alvermont," the Duke interrupted coldly. "But I will not begin my marriage as an object of ridicule. The knight's exile to Meridia is a start, but not enough." "What more would you have?" Mercer asked. "The king would never permit harm to come to his favored knight, especially before the wedding. Any move against Leonhart now would jeopardize the alliance." Radcliffe resumed his pacing, hands clasped behind his back. "I don't intend to harm him, yet, but I will have the truth. I will know what passed between them at that hunting lodge." "And how do you propose to discover this truth? The princess certainly won't tell you, nor will the knight." A grim smile spread across the Duke's face. "There are other members of that expedition. Servants, guards. One of them must have seen something, heard something. And if they're all loyal to the princess—" "Everyone has a price, Mercer," Radcliffe said dismissively, "or a weakness. Find me someone who was at that lodge, someone who can be persuaded to share what they observed." The older man sighed, rising stiffly from his chair. "I shall make inquiries, discreetly of course." "See that you do," the Duke commanded. "I will not be made a fool of, not by a disgraced knight and a princess who forgets her place." As Mercer bowed and took his leave, Radcliffe moved to the window, staring out at the darkening gardens below. Tomorrow, Sir Leonhart would depart for Meridia, removed from the game, but the Duke couldn't shake the feeling that even from across the southern sea, the night remained a threat to his plans. "Enjoy your final night in Eldoria, Sir Knight," he murmured to the empty air. "For when, if you return, you'll find much changed." In her chambers on the opposite side of the castle, Isabel stood motionless as 3 seamstresses made final adjustments to her wedding gown. The creation was undeniably magnificent. Ivory silk embroidered with gold thread and seed pearls, a train that would stretch the length of the cathedral aisle, sleeves that tapered to delicate points over her hands. It was the dress of a fairy tale, fit for a princess marrying her prince. Except her prince was a cold-eyed duke who viewed her as property, and her heart belonged to a knight being sent across the world to remove him from her life. "A small adjustment at the waist, Your Highness," murmured the head seamstress, her mouth full of pins. "Please remain still." Isabel complied, though inside she felt like screaming, like tearing the beautiful gown to shreds and running through the castle halls until she found Leonhart, until they could flee together beyond the reach of duties and alliances. Instead, she stood like a statue, playing her role as she had been trained to do since childhood. Lady Beatrice watched from a cushioned window seat, her sharp eyes missing nothing. When the seamstresses finally finished and packed away their implements, promising the completed gown would be delivered the day before the wedding, Beatrice dismissed them with practiced efficiency. "You should eat something, Princess," she said once they were alone. "You've barely touched food all day." "I'm not hungry," Isabel replied, carefully removing the partially pinned gown with Beatrice's help. "Nevertheless, you need your strength." The lady-in-waiting's voice softened with concern. "For what lies ahead?" Isabel sank onto a cushioned chair, suddenly exhausted. "What lies ahead is exactly what has always been planned for me. A political marriage, a life of duty, children to secure the alliance. The path never changed, Beatrice. Only my heart did. The path may be fixed, but how you walk it remains your choice, Beatrice said, pouring a cup of herbal tea and pressing it into Isabel's hands. Many a queen has found her power within the confines of a political marriage. Is that what I'm to become? A manipulator of men and circumstances, finding scraps of freedom in the spaces between duty. The bitterness in her voice surprised even herself. Beatrice sat beside her, her weathered face serious. I have served 3 generations of Eldorian women, Princess. Your grandmother, your mother, and now you. Not one of them surrendered her spirit to the demands of her position. They found ways to preserve what mattered most to them, even when it seemed impossible. My mother told me something similar, Isabel admitted, about finding spaces between the bars of one's cage. The queen is a wise woman, Beatrice agreed, and she knows of what she speaks. A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. One of the younger handmaidens entered, curtsying deeply. Forgive the intrusion, Your Highness, but a package has arrived for you, she said, presenting a small wooden box tied with a simple ribbon. Isabel accepted it curiously. Who brought this? A messenger, my lady. He didn't give a name, only said it was for your eyes alone. After the handmaiden had withdrawn, Isabel examined the box. It bore no markings, no clue as to its sender or contents. With careful fingers, she untied the ribbon and lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of moss, lay a small object that brought tears to her eyes, a carved wooden falcon, small enough to fit in her palm, crafted with exquisite detail. From Sir Leonhart, Beatrice observed quietly. Yes, Isabel whispered, lifting the carving gently. As she did, a small piece of parchment beneath it came into view. Unfolding it, she read the brief message written in a strong, direct hand. The falcon may fly far, but always knows its true home, until spring returns to the world. No signature, no names, nothing that could implicate either of them if discovered. Yet the meaning was clear to her heart. Despite his exile to Meridia, despite the thousands of miles that would soon separate them, Leonhart still intended to find his way back to her when spring returned. He leaves at dawn, Isabel said, closing her fingers around the wooden falcon. I won't even have a chance to say goodbye. Beatrice hesitated, then spoke carefully. There may be a way, Princess. The night watch changes at midnight. The eastern postern gate is guarded by Thomas, one of the men who accompanied us to the hunting lodge. Hope flared in Isabel's chest. You're suggesting— I suggest nothing, Beatrice replied with deliberate ambiguity. I merely observe that a cloaked figure might pass unnoticed to the knight's quarters after midnight, and that certain guards might suddenly find themselves very occupied with duties elsewhere. Isabel stared at her lady-in-waiting, tears welling in her eyes. You would risk your position for this? I risk nothing that matters compared to your happiness, Beatrice said simply. Besides, an old woman like me should be allowed one romantic gesture before she faces her maker. Impulsively, Isabel embraced her, the wooden falcon still clutched in her hand. Thank you, she whispered, for understanding. Understanding costs nothing, Beatrice replied, patting her back. Now, you must rest until nightfall, and you must eat, she added firmly. I'll have a tray brought up. Midnight found Isabel wrapped in a dark cloak, her distinctive auburn hair covered by a hood, slipping through the shadowy corridors of the sleeping castle. True to Beatrice's word, the guards who might have questioned her were conveniently absent from their posts, and those who remained, including Thomas at the eastern postern, gave only the slightest nod of acknowledgement as she passed. The knight's quarters were located in the eastern wing of the castle, close to the armory and training grounds. Unlike the luxurious chambers provided for noble visitors, these were Spartan accommodations, clean and adequate, but designed for men whose lives were dedicated to service rather than comfort. Leonhart's quarters were at the end of a long corridor, distinguished from the others only by a small carved falcon above the doorframe. The emblem he had adopted as his own, though he possessed no formal heraldry. Isabel hesitated outside his door, sudden doubt assailing her. Was this wise? Was it fair to either of them to prolong a farewell that must inevitably come? For a moment, she considered turning back, letting him depart with the dignity of their formal goodbye in the great hall. Then she thought of the years that stretched ahead, of a life at Alvermont with the Duke, of children she would bear, of duties she would fulfill, all without ever having had this one final moment with the man she truly loved. Before her courage could falter further, she knocked softly on the door. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then the door opened, revealing Leonhardt in simple linen shirt and breeches, his hair tousled as if he'd been running his hands through it in thought. His eyes widened at the sight of her, disbelief quickly giving way to a joy he couldn't conceal. "Isabel," he breathed, stepping back to let her enter. "How?" "Don't ask," she said, pushing back her hood as he closed the door quietly behind her. "Let's just say I have friends as loyal as yours." His quarters were as austere as she'd imagined. A narrow bed, a simple table and chair, a small hearth where embers still glowed. His few possessions were already packed in a traveling chest that sat ready by the door. The only personal touch was a sword mounted on the wall, not his service weapon, but an older blade, perhaps a family heirloom. "You shouldn't have come," he said, though his eyes contradicted his words. "If you were discovered." "Then I would face the consequences," she replied simply. "But I couldn't let you leave for Meridia without a proper goodbye." "Meridia," he repeated, a shadow crossing his face. "The Duke's final insult. You know, then." "I was informed this afternoon." Leonhardt moved to the hearth, stirring the embers to bring the fire back to life. "A great honor, they called it. A position of trust and significance." "An exile by another name," Isabel added quietly. He turned back to her, his blue eyes grave in the firelight. "I would have gone to Frostwatch without complaint, served out my time there honorably. But Meridia—" He shook his head. "The Duke seeks not just to separate us, but to ensure I can never return to Eldoria during his lifetime." "My mother says ambassadorial duties eventually bring men home," Isabel offered, though the words sounded hollow even to her own ears. "Perhaps," Leonhardt acknowledged, "but not for years. 5, 10, who can say?" He ran a hand through his hair in a rare gesture of frustration. "By then, you will have been the Duchess of Alvermont for a decade. You'll have children, responsibilities, a life built in his shadow." "A life I never chose," she reminded him. "A cage, however gilded. And I'll be powerless to free you from it." The anguish in his voice cut her to the quick. Isabel crossed the room to him, placing her hands on his chest, feeling the strong, steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. "You've already freed the part of me that matters most," she said softly. "My heart has known love, real love, not the political arrangement that awaits me. Whatever happens next, I carry that knowledge with me." Leonhardt covered her hands with his own. "I received orders this evening to leave before dawn, earlier than planned. The Duke's influence, no doubt, ensuring we wouldn't have this very moment. Yet here we are," Isabel said, a hint of defiance in her smile. "Perhaps not all his schemes will succeed so easily." "He is dangerous, Isabel," Leonhardt warned. "More than you know. Men speak of his cruelty in Alvermont, whispers of servants who disappear, of rivals who meet with unfortunate accidents. Be careful with him. Promise me." "I promise," she said solemnly. "I'll give him no reason to doubt my public loyalty." What remained unspoken between them was the understanding that her private heart would never be his. Leonhardt's hands tightened on hers. "I have something for you," he said, "something to carry with you to Alvermont." Releasing her, he moved to the traveling chest, opening it to withdraw a small object wrapped in soft leather. When he unwrapped it, Isabel gasped softly. It was a dagger, no longer than her hand, with a hilt of polished wood inlaid with silver in the pattern of a falcon's wing. The blade itself was Damascus steel, its surface rippling like water under moonlight. "My mother's," he explained, offering it to her. "The only thing of value she possessed. She gave it to me before she died, said it had protected women in her family for generations." Isabel accepted it with reverence, feeling the perfect balance of the weapon in her palm. "Leonhardt, I can't take this. It's your heritage. your connection to her. And now it's my promise to you, he said firmly, that no matter how far I travel, no matter how many years pass, I will find my way back to Eldoria. Back to you. Tears filled her eyes as she clutched the dagger to her heart. I'll keep it always, she vowed, hidden but near. As I'll keep you, he replied, his voice rough with emotion. Hidden in my heart, but forever near. The small fire crackled in the hearth, casting their shadows long against the stone wall. Outside, the castle slept, unaware of the covenant being made in this austere chamber, a promise that transcended duty, distance, and the schemes of powerful men. Isabel stepped into Leonhardt's embrace, laying her head against his chest. How much time do we have? A few hours, no more, he answered, his arms tightening around her. The ship awaits at dawn. Then let's not waste a moment, she whispered, lifting her face to his. Their kiss was different from those they had shared at the hunting lodge, deeper, more urgent, tinged with the knowledge that it might be their last for years, perhaps forever. In it, they poured all the words they couldn't say, all the hopes they couldn't voice, all the futures they couldn't promise. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Leonhardt rested his forehead against hers. Remember this, he said softly. When duty weighs heaviest, when the Duke's coldness seems unbearable, remember that somewhere in this world, a man loves you completely, without condition or expectation. And you, Isabel replied, when Meridia seems most foreign, when home feels furthest away, remember that your true north remains here, waiting for your return. The night deepened around them, the castle's ancient stones keeping their secrets as princess and knight carved out one final memory to sustain them through the years of separation to come. The Cathedral of St. Aldrich stood at the heart of Eldoria's capital, its soaring spires and ancient stone walls, a testament to the kingdom's enduring faith and prosperity. On the morning of Princess Isabel's wedding, the massive structure was transformed into a vision from a minstrel's tale. Garlands of white roses and golden lilies draped across every arch, thousands of candles casting a warm glow over the assembled nobility. Sunlight streaming through stained glass windows to create pools of jewel-toned light on the marble floor. Outside, commoners lined the streets to catch a glimpse of their beloved princess, their cheers echoing through the city as her procession made its way from the castle. Inside, the most powerful figures in the northern kingdoms waited, resplendent in their finest attire, for the ceremony that would cement the alliance between Eldoria and Alvermont. At the front of the cathedral, Duke Radcliffe stood rigid in crimson and black, his thin face a mask of satisfaction as he surveyed the gathered dignitaries. This was his triumph, the culmination of years of political maneuvering, the final piece in his carefully constructed plan for dominance among the northern kingdoms. By nightfall, he would have the most valuable prize of all, the princess whose bloodline would legitimize his future rule. The massive cathedral doors swung open. A hush fell over the assembly as Princess Isabel appeared at the entrance, a vision in ivory and gold, her train carried by 6 noble-born girls, her face partially obscured by a delicate veil. King Edmund stood at her side, resplendent in royal blue and silver, prepared to escort his only daughter down the aisle to her future husband. As the musicians began the traditional wedding processional, Isabel took her first measured steps into the cathedral. Her face beneath the veil revealed nothing of her inner thoughts, her posture perfect, her movements graceful, every inch the royal princess performing her duty to kingdom and crown. None could see the small wooden falcon she carried tucked within the ceremonial bouquet, nor the slender dagger strapped to her thigh beneath the voluminous skirts of her wedding gown. These secret talismans were all she had left of Leonhardt, who by now would be far out at sea, sailing toward distant Meridia and years of exile. "You look beautiful, daughter," King Edmund murmured as they began their slow procession down the aisle. "Your mother and I are very proud of you today." "Thank you, father," Isabel replied softly, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her heart. "I shall endeavor to bring honor to Eldoria in my new role." The king's grip on her arm tightened slightly. "I know the Duke was not your choice," he said, pitched low enough that only she could hear. But in time, you may find contentment in Alvermont. Your mother did, though she too faced an arranged marriage. I understand my duty, Isabel assured him, her eyes fixed forward on the altar and the man waiting there. I have accepted it. They continued in silence, passing row after row of nobles whose curious eyes tracked their every movement. Finally, they reached the altar steps, where Bishop Mallory waited, his ornate robes gleaming with golden embroidery, his ancient face solemn beneath his ceremonial mitre. "Who presents this woman to be married?" the bishop intoned, his voice carrying through the vast cathedral. "I, Edmund, King of Eldoria, present my daughter Isabel," her father replied formally. With that, he placed Isabel's hand in Duke Radcliffe's cold grip and stepped back. The Duke's thin lips curved in what might have passed for a smile as he led her up the final steps to stand before the bishop. "Dearly beloved," Bishop Mallory began, "we gather in the sight of God and these witnesses to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony, a sacred bond not to be entered into lightly, but with reverence and solemn purpose." As the bishop continued the traditional opening of the ceremony, Isabel felt strangely detached, as if watching herself from a great distance. This was the moment that had been planned for her since childhood, the fulfillment of her purpose as a royal daughter. Yet inside, where no one could see, a small flame of rebellion still burned, a private corner of her heart that remained utterly her own, untouched by duty or politics. "Lord Radcliffe of Alvermont," the bishop said, turning to the Duke, "do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to love and to cherish, to honor and protect, from this day forward until death parts you?" "I do," Radcliffe answered firmly, his cold gray eyes fixed on Isabel with unmistakable possession. "Princess Isabel of Eldoria," the bishop continued, turning to her, "do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to love and to cherish, to honor and obey from this day forward until death parts you?" Isabel drew a steadying breath. In the front row, she could see her mother watching her intently, the queen's face a composed mask that revealed nothing of her thoughts. Beside her sat Lord Harwick, his shrewd eyes narrowed as if expecting some last-minute disruption. The faces of the assembled nobility blurred together as Isabel focused on the words she had been born to speak. A commotion at the rear of the cathedral interrupted her response. Heads turned as the massive doors swung open once more, admitting a figure who strode rapidly down the central aisle. Not Leonhardt. Isabel's heart had leapt at the thought before her mind quashed it. But a royal messenger, his blue and silver livery dusty from hard riding, his face grim with urgency. "Your Majesty," he called, ignoring the scandalized murmurs his interruption caused. "Forgive the intrusion, but I bear news that cannot wait." King Edmund rose from his seat, his expression darkening. "What is the meaning of this?" The messenger reached the front of the cathedral, dropping to one knee before the king. "Ships, Your Majesty," he gasped, clearly exhausted from his journey. "Northumbrian warships have been sighted off the eastern coast. A massive fleet, flying battle colors." A wave of shocked whispers swept through the cathedral. Duke Radcliffe's grip on Isabel's hand tightened painfully. "Nonsense," the Duke declared, his voice cutting through the rising alarm. "Northumbria has no quarrel with Eldoria or Alvermont. This is clearly some mistake, a merchant fleet misidentified, perhaps." The messenger shook his head. "No mistake, my Lord Duke. I saw them myself from the coastal watchtower. 30 ships at least, heavily armed, flying the Black Raven of King Harold. They will make landfall by nightfall if the winds hold." King Edmund turned to his war minister, who had already risen to his feet. "Summon the council immediately. Alert the coastal garrisons." To the assembled guests, he announced, "The ceremony must be postponed. Eldoria faces a threat that requires our immediate attention." "Postponed?" Duke Radcliffe's voice was sharp with displeasure. "Surely a wedding ceremony can be completed before any war council meets. The princess and I need only speak our vows, and then I shall join you in addressing this unexpected development." The king hesitated, clearly torn between protocol and urgency. Before he could respond, Queen Eleanor rose gracefully to her feet. "My Lord Duke," she said, her voice pleasant but firm, Surely you would not wish your wedding day to be overshadowed by rumors of war. Better to address this threat, ensure the safety of both our kingdoms, and then celebrate your union properly, with the attention and reverence it deserves. Something flashed in Radcliffe's eyes, a cold calculation that sent a chill down Isabel's spine. After a moment he inclined his head in reluctant agreement. "As always, your Majesty's wisdom prevails," he said smoothly. "Let us first secure our borders, then complete what we have begun here today." Relief flooded through Isabel, though she was careful to keep her expression neutral. A reprieve, however brief, from speaking vows she could never truly mean with her heart. The cathedral quickly emptied as nobles hurried back to their estates, many of which lay along the vulnerable eastern coastline. Isabel found herself escorted back to the castle by a contingent of guards, her mother at her side, while her father and the Duke rode ahead to convene the emergency war council. "A most unexpected development," Queen Eleanor remarked once they were alone in the royal carriage. "Indeed," Isabel replied carefully, studying her mother's face. "Northumbria has been peaceful for nearly a decade. Why would they attack now, without provocation?" The Queen's expression revealed nothing. Who can fathom the minds of ambitious kings? Perhaps Harold sees opportunity where others perceive stability. Or perhaps someone has given him reason to believe Eldoria is vulnerable, Isabel suggested, thinking of the timing. Too perfect to be coincidence. Her mother's lips curved in the slightest of smiles. "Perhaps. In any case, your wedding has been postponed indefinitely while this threat is addressed. A most unfortunate delay." The note of satisfaction in Eleanor's voice confirmed what Isabel had begun to suspect. This was no random attack, no coincidental timing. Someone had orchestrated this interruption, and her mother, at the very least, had expected it. "How long will the postponement last?" Isabel asked, hardly daring to hope. "That depends on many factors," the Queen replied. "Northumbrian intentions, our military readiness, the Duke's cooperation." She patted Isabel's hand. "War councils and military preparations are complex affairs. They could take weeks, even months." "And the Duke?" He seemed most displeased. "Radcliffe will adapt," Eleanor said confidently. "He has no choice if he wishes to maintain the alliance. Besides, his own eastern territories are potentially at risk from this Northumbrian fleet. His self-interest will require him to participate in Eldoria's defense." As the carriage approached the castle, Isabel looked out at the suddenly bustling courtyard, where soldiers mustered and messengers came and went at a frantic pace. The machinery of war was already in motion, transforming her wedding day into something entirely unexpected, a day of reprieve rather than resignation. "Mother," she said quietly, "did you have anything to do with this?" Queen Eleanor's green eyes, so like her daughter's, revealed nothing. "A mother's primary duty is to protect her child by whatever means necessary," she replied obliquely. "Remember that, Isabel, for someday you too will be a mother." The implication hung between them, neither confirmed nor denied. Before Isabel could press further, the carriage stopped and royal guards rushed forward to escort them safely inside. The War Council chamber buzzed with urgent activity as maps were unfurled, reports delivered, and strategies debated. King Edmund sat at the head of the massive oak table, his brow furrowed in concentration as his military commanders outlined the kingdom's defensive capabilities. Duke Radcliffe occupied the position of honor at the king's right hand, though his expression suggested he found the entire situation increasingly suspicious. 30 ships, you say?" the Duke questioned, interrupting a naval commander's assessment. Yet no advance warning, no diplomatic tensions to suggest such an attack was imminent. "Northumbrians are known for their stealth," General Blackthorne replied, a veteran of the last border conflict. "King Harold has always favored surprise over open confrontation." "Even so," Radcliffe persisted, "such a fleet requires months of preparation. Our spies in Northumbria reported nothing unusual." "Perhaps your spies are not as effective as you believe," suggested Lord Harwick with a thin smile. "Or perhaps they report to more than one master?" The implication of divided loyalties hung in the air like a drawn blade. The Duke's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Careful, Harwick. Questioning my loyalty to this alliance is dangerous ground." King Edmund raised a hand for silence. This is no time for accusations among allies. The threat before us is real, regardless of how it escaped our notice. The question now is how to respond. We must dispatch our own fleet immediately, urged Admiral Weston, the kingdom's naval commander. Intercept them before they can make landfall. Our ships are scattered along the coast, another commander objected. Gathering them would take days, time we don't have if the Northumbrians truly arrive by nightfall. Then we fortify the coastal villages, General Blackthorne argued. Evacuate civilians, strengthen garrisons, prepare for ground defense. As the debate continued, Duke Radcliffe leaned closer to the king. A curious coincidence, wouldn't you agree? He murmured. That this threat appears precisely as I am about to wed your daughter. King Edmund's expression hardened. What exactly are you implying, Radcliffe? Nothing, Your Majesty, the Duke replied smoothly. Merely observing the remarkable timing, almost as if someone wished to prevent our union from being completed. If you're suggesting this is some elaborate deception, I suggest nothing, Radcliffe interrupted. But I will note that a postponed wedding leaves certain opportunities open that a completed one would close permanently. The king's eyes flashed with anger. Speak plainly, Duke. Sir Leonhart, Radcliffe said simply. Has his ship departed for Meridia? Or might he still be conveniently available should this crisis create a need for Eldoria's finest knight? Before King Edmund could respond, the chamber doors swung open to admit Captain Galen, the head of the Royal Guard. Your Majesty, he announced with a bow, a ship has just arrived in the harbor bearing an envoy from Northumbria. He requests an immediate audience. Surprise rippled through the assembled council. An envoy? The king repeated. While their war fleet approaches our shores? He carries a flag of parley, Captain Galen explained, and claims to bring terms that will prevent bloodshed. King Edmund exchanged glances with his advisors before nodding decisively. Bring him here immediately. Let us hear what Northumbria demands before we commit our forces. As the captain departed to fetch the envoy, Duke Radcliffe sat back in his chair, his expression calculating. How convenient, he remarked to no one in particular. A threat appears and is immediately followed by an opportunity for negotiation, almost as if it were choreographed. Lord Harwick bristled. You overstep, Duke. Are you accusing the king himself of orchestrating this crisis? I merely observe patterns, Radcliffe replied coldly, and I find today's events remarkable in their sequence. Further debate was cut short by the return of Captain Galen, followed by a tall figure in the distinctive dark blue and silver of a Northumbrian diplomatic envoy. The man bowed deeply before the assembly. Your Majesty, he greeted King Edmund. I am Lord Conrad Blackwell, personal emissary of King Harold of Northumbria. I come bearing a message of utmost importance. Speak, the king commanded. Though I warn you, threats against Eldoria will be met with the full force of our military might. Lord Conrad straightened, his expression grave. No threats, Your Majesty. Quite the opposite. I bring news that may change the course of relations between our kingdoms forever. He reached into his tunic and withdrew a sealed parchment bearing King Harold's distinctive raven insignia. My sovereign instructed me to deliver this directly into your hands and to await your response before our fleet takes any action. With visible wariness, King Edmund accepted the document, breaking the seal to read its contents. As his eyes moved across the page, his expression transformed from suspicion to shock, then to a curious mixture of disbelief and calculation. Leave us, he suddenly ordered, his voice cutting through the tense silence. All except Duke Radcliffe and Lord Harwick. The room quickly emptied of military commanders and lesser advisors, leaving only the three men seated around the massive table, the Northumbrian envoy standing respectfully to one side. What does Harold want? Radcliffe demanded once the doors had closed. King Edmund handed him the parchment without comment. The Duke read quickly, his face darkening with each line. This is absurd, he finally spat. An obvious ploy to disrupt our alliance. What does it say? Lord Harwick asked, unable to contain his curiosity. The king reclaimed the document, his expression thoughtful. King Harold proposes a different alliance, one secured not by Princess Isabel's marriage to Alvermont, but by her marriage to his son, Prince Rowan. "Preposterous!" Radcliffe exclaimed. "The princess is already promised to me. The ceremony was interrupted mere moments before completion." "Yet not completed," Lord Harwick pointed out, earning a venomous glare from the Duke. "In exchange," King Edmund continued, "Northumbria offers perpetual peace with Eldoria, open trade routes, military assistance against any aggression from the eastern kingdoms, and—" he paused significantly, "the return of the contested Silver Isles to Eldorian control." Lord Harwick inhaled sharply. The Silver Isles, rich in mineral deposits and strategic in their position, had been lost to Northumbria during the last war, a bitter defeat that still rankled many in the Eldorian court. "A generous offer," the advisor observed carefully. "A transparent attempt to drive a wedge between Eldoria and Alvermont," Radcliffe countered. "Your Majesty, surely you see this for the manipulation it is. The princess is bound to me by formal agreement. Breaking that pact would constitute an act of war in itself." King Edmund studied the Duke's face, his own expression unreadable. "The agreement stipulated marriage, Duke Radcliffe, a ceremony that, as you pointed out, was not completed." "On technicality only." Radcliffe's control was slipping, his carefully cultivated poise giving way to genuine anger. "Because of this conveniently timed crisis." "Nevertheless," the king replied calmly, "Northumbria's offer must be considered on its merits. The Silver Isles alone would double Eldoria's silver production. Combined with free trade and military alliance," he didn't need to finish the statement. The advantages were obvious. Duke Radcliffe rose to his feet, his lean frame rigid with suppressed fury. "I remind your Majesty that Alvermont controls the eastern mountain passes. Without our alliance, your kingdom is vulnerable to blockade and invasion from multiple fronts." "Are you threatening Eldoria, Duke?" Lord Harwick asked quietly. "I am stating facts," Radcliffe snapped. "Facts that King Edmund would do well to remember before entertaining this absurd proposal." The king appeared unmoved by the implied threat. "Lord Conrad," he addressed the Northumbrian envoy, who had remained silent throughout the exchange, "inform King Harold that I will consider his proposal with the seriousness it deserves. I request 3 days to consult with my advisors before giving a formal response." "Of course, your Majesty," the envoy replied with another bow. "Our fleet will remain at anchor offshore, maintaining a respectful distance from your territories until your decision is reached." After the envoy had been escorted out, Duke Radcliffe rounded on the king. "You cannot seriously be considering this offer?" "I am considering all options that benefit Eldoria," King Edmund replied evenly, "as is my duty. Our alliance—" "Remains intact for now," the king interrupted. "But circumstances have changed, Radcliffe. Surely you can appreciate that a king must evaluate new opportunities as they arise." The Duke's eyes narrowed to dangerous slits. "This was orchestrated," he said flatly. "By whom, I cannot yet prove, but orchestrated nonetheless. Perhaps by those who wish to see Sir Leonhart return from his voyage to Meridia, now conveniently postponed due to the coastal threat." "A serious accusation," Lord Harwick observed. "One I intend to prove," Radcliffe promised, his voice low with menace. "And when I do, those responsible will learn the true cost of manipulating the Duke of Alvermont." With a stiff bow to the king, he turned on his heel and strode from the chamber, the heavy door slamming behind him with ominous finality. King Edmund and Lord Harwick exchanged glances in the sudden silence. "He will be a dangerous enemy," Harwick noted. "Perhaps," the king agreed, "but Northumbria would be a powerful friend." He tapped the parchment thoughtfully. "Send for the Queen and Princess. There are matters we must discuss, privately." As Lord Harwick rose to carry out the order, King Edmund remained seated, staring at the Northumbrian proposal with an expression that revealed nothing of his thoughts. Whatever game was being played, the stakes had just been raised significantly, and his daughter's future hung in the balance. Princess Isabel stood at the window of her chambers, watching as the sun set over Eldoria Castle's western towers. 3 days had passed since the interrupted wedding. 3 days of furious diplomatic activity and whispered rumors throughout the court. The Northumbrian fleet remained anchored offshore, visible from the castle's highest points, a constant reminder of how quickly her fate had changed course. She was still dressed in a simple day gown of forest green, having refused to return to her wedding attire when summoned to her father's private council chamber. That particular garment had been carefully stored away, perhaps never to be worn again if the swirling speculations proved true. A soft knock at the door preceded Lady Beatrice's entrance. The older woman's face was unusually animated, her eyes bright with barely contained excitement. "The king requests your presence immediately, Princess," she announced. "The council has reached its decision regarding the Northumbrian proposal." Isabel's heart quickened, though she kept her expression neutral. "Has the Duke been informed as well?" "Duke Radcliffe was summoned an hour ago," Beatrice confirmed. "He looked displeased when he entered the king's council chamber." "When is he not?" Isabel murmured, smoothing her skirts and checking her appearance in the polished silver mirror. "Very well. I am ready." The walk to the council chamber felt endless, each step carrying her closer to yet another future determined by others. Yet this time, a curious hope flickered within her. Whatever game was being played behind the scenes, and she had her suspicions, it had granted her a reprieve from life as Duchess of Alvermont. Perhaps now it would offer something more. Royal guards opened the heavy oak doors, revealing a scene of carefully managed tension. King Edmund sat at the head of the long table, Queen Eleanor at his side, her face composed but her eyes watchful. Duke Radcliffe stood rigidly near the window, his back to the room as if he could not bear to face its other occupants. Lord Harwick and several other royal advisers were seated along the table's length, their expressions ranging from satisfied to apprehensive. Most surprisingly, Lord Conrad of Northumbria was present, standing respectfully near the king's position. "Ah, Isabel," King Edmund greeted her. "Please join us. We have much to discuss concerning your future." She curtsied formally before taking the seat indicated at her father's left hand. "I am at your Majesty's disposal, as always." "Always the dutiful daughter," Duke Radcliffe commented, without turning from the window, his voice laced with bitter irony. "How fortunate for Eldoria." The king ignored the barb. "Isabel, you are aware of King Harold's proposal regarding a potential alliance between Eldoria and Northumbria, sealed by your marriage to Prince Rowan." "I have heard rumors," she replied carefully, "though no official word until now." "The offer is genuine," her father confirmed. And after 3 days of deliberation, weighing the advantages and disadvantages of both alliances, the council has reached a decision. He paused, his eyes moving to the Duke's rigid back. "We have decided to accept Northumbria's proposal." Though she had suspected this outcome, hearing it stated so plainly sent a jolt through Isabel's body. Freedom from Radcliffe, yet commitment to another man she had never met. One cage exchanged for another, perhaps, but at least a different one. Duke Radcliffe turned slowly, his face a mask of cold fury. "Then our alliance is broken," he stated flatly. "Eldoria has chosen to dishonor its agreements with Alvermont. There will be consequences." "The alliance need not end, Duke Radcliffe," Queen Eleanor interjected smoothly. "Merely evolve. Trade agreements can still stand. Military cooperation against common enemies remains beneficial to both our realms." "You speak of cooperation after this betrayal." The Duke's voice was dangerously quiet. "You promise my continued friendship while handing what was rightfully mine to a traditional enemy?" "The princess is not property, my lord," Lord Harwick pointed out, earning a venomous glare. "She is a political asset," Radcliffe countered coldly. "One promised to me through formal treaty, nearly delivered at the altar, then snatched away through obvious manipulation." King Edmund's expression hardened. "Choose your words with care, Duke. You stand in my castle, addressing my council, speaking of my daughter." "And you, your majesty, stand on the precipice of war," Radcliffe replied. "Alvermont will not accept this insult quietly. Our mountain passes will close to Eldorian trade. Our borders will be sealed against your citizens. And should Northumbria's promises prove false, as I suspect they will find no ally at your back." Lord Conrad stepped forward, his Northumbrian accent distinct but his manner impeccably diplomatic. "If I may, your majesty?" Perhaps the Duke would better understand King Harold's sincerity if he heard the full terms of our proposal. The king nodded permission, though Radcliffe's expression suggested nothing would sway his position. In addition to returning the Silver Isles to Eldorian control and establishing permanent trade routes, Lord Conrad began, King Harold offers territorial concessions along our shared border, the disputed Westmark region, to be specific, which would give Eldoria control of the rich farmlands and timber resources there. This was new information, even to Isabel. The Westmark had been contested for generations, its ownership changing hands with each border skirmish or minor war. Furthermore, Conrad continued, to demonstrate our commitment to this new alliance, Prince Rowan himself has journeyed to Eldoria, arriving this morning. He awaits your Majesty's pleasure to present himself formally to the court and to Princess Isabel. Surprised murmurs circulated among the advisors. The Northumbrian prince was already here. Such confidence in the negotiations' outcome bordered on presumption. How convenient, Duke Radcliffe remarked acidly. The prince arrives just as the decision is made, almost as if he knew the outcome in advance. King Harold is a man of decisive action, Conrad replied, unruffled by the accusation. Once he determined to pursue this alliance, he saw no reason for delay. King Edmund turned to his daughter. Isabel, you have remained silent. This affects your future most directly. What are your thoughts? All eyes turned to her, and Isabel felt the weight of the moment. Whatever she said now would be scrutinized, remembered, perhaps used against her later. She chose her words with careful precision. As a princess of Eldoria, my primary duty has always been to serve the kingdom's interests, she began, meeting her father's gaze steadily. If the council believes an alliance with Northumbria better serves those interests than one with Alvermont, then I accept its wisdom. How diplomatic, the Duke sneered. Yet I wonder if your acceptance comes from duty, or relief at escaping our union. Isabel turned to face him directly, refusing to be intimidated by his barely controlled rage. My feelings are irrelevant to matters of state, my lord. As you yourself have often pointed out, royal marriages are political arrangements, not romantic entanglements. Well said, Queen Eleanor approved with the faintest smile. King Edmund nodded, seeming satisfied with her response. Then it is settled. Lord Conrad, please inform Prince Rowan that we will receive him at court this evening. The formal announcement of the new alliance will be made then. What of compensation? Duke Radcliffe demanded. Eldoria has broken a binding agreement. There must be reparations. The king's expression grew calculating. We are prepared to offer reasonable compensation for any preparations Alvermont has made regarding the wedding. Lord Harwick will discuss specifics with your advisors. Gold cannot erase insult, Radcliffe said coldly, nor can it repay opportunity denied. Nevertheless, it is what we offer, the king replied with finality. Accept it with grace, Duke Radcliffe, and our realms may yet find ways to coexist peacefully. Reject it, and you place Alvermont in opposition not only to Eldoria, but to Northumbria as well, a precarious position even for a domain as strong as yours. The implied threat hung in the air between them. After a long, tense moment, the Duke inclined his head in what barely qualified as a bow. I will consider Eldoria's generous offer, he said, each word dripping with sarcasm. Now, if the council has no further need of me, I will take my leave to prepare for my return to Alvermont. I find the air in Eldoria has suddenly grown stifling. With that parting shot, he strode from the chamber, not bothering to observe the proper protocols of dismissal before the king. The heavy door slammed behind him, its echo reverberating through the sudden silence. He will be a dangerous enemy, Lord Harwick observed, repeating his assessment from days earlier. Better a known enemy than a false friend, Queen Eleanor replied. Radcliffe's ambitions have always extended beyond simple alliance with Eldoria. This merely forces him to reveal his true intentions sooner rather than later. King Edmund sighed heavily. Let us hope Northumbria proves a more reliable partner. He turned to Lord Conrad. You may tell your prince we await him at the evening court. The rest of you are dismissed, except for the Queen and Princess. I would speak with them privately. As the council members filed out, Isabel remained seated, her mind racing. Everything was happening so quickly, the interrupted wedding, the Northumbrian proposal, and now a prince waiting to meet her. It felt like being swept along by a powerful current, unable to direct her own course. When they were alone, King Edmund's formal demeanor softened slightly. "Isabel, I know this has been disorienting. 3 days ago, you stood at the altar prepared to marry one man, and now you face the prospect of marriage to another." "I understand the necessities of state, Father," she replied, "though I admit the speed of these developments is somewhat overwhelming." "You've met neither Prince Rowan nor Radcliffe before your betrothals," Queen Eleanor observed. "At least this time you'll have the opportunity to form an impression before the formal announcement." "What can you tell me of him?" Isabel asked, curiosity finally overtaking diplomatic caution. "This prince I may soon be promised to?" Her parents exchanged glances. "By reputation, he is well regarded," her father said. "A skilled diplomat despite his warrior training, educated in both northern traditions and southern philosophies. He has led Northumbria's forces in several successful campaigns, yet is known to prefer negotiation to bloodshed." "And in character?" Isabel pressed. "Reports suggest he is different from Duke Radcliffe," the Queen answered carefully. "Less calculating, more straightforward. King Harold has allowed him unusual freedom in choosing his own path, which speaks to the trust between them." It wasn't much to build hope upon, but it was better than what she had known of the Duke before their arranged marriage. At least this Prince Rowan sounded like a man with principles beyond personal ambition. "There is something else you should know," King Edmund said, his expression growing serious. "Something that may explain the unusual timing of these events." Isabel leaned forward, sensing they had reached the heart of the matter. "Yes?" "The Northumbrian envoy arrived with a letter for me, a private communication separate from the formal proposal," her father explained. "It contained information of a most sensitive nature. Information regarding Duke Radcliffe that, if verified, would have made any alliance with Alvermont not merely undesirable, but dangerous." "What information?" Isabel asked, feeling a chill run down her spine. "Evidence that the Duke has been secretly negotiating with our enemies in the Far East," Queen Eleanor replied, "offering them safe passage through his mountain passes in exchange for support in his eventual bid for the Eldorian throne itself." Isabel gasped. "Treason? Before we were even wed?" "The evidence is compelling," her father confirmed grimly. "Documents bearing his seal, testimony from merchants who overheard discussions between his agents and Eastern emissaries. Had the wedding proceeded without this knowledge—" He didn't need to finish the thought. "So Northumbria's sudden proposal was—" "A warning as much as an offer," the king completed. "They had been gathering this intelligence for months, apparently. The fleet was merely to ensure we took the warning seriously." Isabel sat back, processing this revelation. "Does the Duke know you've received this evidence?" "We've given no indication," her mother assured her. "As far as he knows, we've simply been tempted by a better offer. It's safer that way until we can verify everything independently." "And Sir Leonhart?" The question slipped out before Isabel could stop herself. Was his reassignment to Meridia truly necessary, given these developments? Again, her parents exchanged glances, this time with a hint of discomfort. "Leonhardt's ship never left our waters," King Edmund admitted. "It was held in a hidden cove by my direct order, awaiting the outcome of these negotiations." Isabel's heart leapt, though she carefully controlled her expression. "I see. And now?" "Now he will return to court," the Queen said simply. "His exile was Radcliffe's condition, not our desire. With the Alvermont alliance dissolved, there is no reason he cannot resume his proper place as one of Eldoria's most valued knights." Joy surged through Isabel, almost overwhelming in its intensity. Leonhardt was still here, would be returning to court, would not be spending years across the southern sea. The realization was so powerful she nearly missed her father's next words. "You care for him greatly, don't you?" King Edmund asked quietly, his eyes studying her face with new awareness. Isabel froze, uncertain how to respond. Denial seemed pointless, yet admission could be dangerous, even now. "I respect Sir Leonhart deeply," she said carefully, "as do all who value loyalty and honor." "That wasn't my question," her father pressed. his tone gentle but insistent. After a moment's hesitation, Isabel met his gaze directly. "Yes," she said simply. "I care for him. More than I should, perhaps, given our respective positions." To her surprise, the king's expression showed no anger or disapproval, only a complex mixture of resignation and something that might have been regret. "I suspected as much," he sighed. "Even before the incident at the hunting lodge. The way you look at each other, it reminded me of something I witnessed long ago." Queen Eleanor reached over to place her hand on his, a silent communication passing between them that Isabel couldn't decipher. "Father," she began hesitantly, "I would never have acted on those feelings had my duty to Eldoria required otherwise. You must believe that." "I do," he assured her. "You've proven your loyalty to the crown many times over." He paused, seeming to weigh his next words carefully. "But sometimes duty and heart need not be enemies. Sometimes, if fortune favors us, they can find alignment." Isabel glanced between her parents, sensing deeper currents beneath this conversation. "What are you saying?" "That the world changes, Isabel," her mother answered. "Alliances shift. What seems impossible today may become possible tomorrow." She squeezed the king's hand. "For now, focus on the immediate future. Meet Prince Rowan with an open mind. Judge his character for yourself. The rest will unfold as it will." It was cryptic advice, offering neither promise nor denial of the hope that had suddenly bloomed in Isabel's heart. Yet something in her mother's tone, in her father's unexpected understanding, gave her permission to nurture that hope, however tentatively. "I should prepare for the evening court," Isabel said, rising from her chair. "If I am to meet a prince, I should at least look the part of a princess." Her father nodded, dismissing her with a gentle smile. As she reached the door, however, he called after her. "Isabel." When she turned back, he added, "Sometimes a king must weigh not only what is politically expedient, but what is right. Remember that, when your own time to rule comes." The strange comment stayed with her as she made her way back to her chambers, where Lady Beatrice was already selecting appropriate attire for the evening's momentous meeting. Whatever game was being played in the halls of power, Isabel sensed that she was no longer merely a piece to be moved across the board, but perhaps at last one of the players. The great hall of Eldoria Castle was transformed for the evening reception. Hundreds of candles in ornate silver holders cast a warm glow over the assembled nobility, while musicians played softly from a gallery above. Banners bearing the emblems of both Eldoria and Northumbria hung side by side, the golden eagle and the midnight raven, traditional enemies now displayed as potential allies. Isabel stood beside her parents on the dais, wearing a gown of deep sapphire blue trimmed with silver. A deliberate nod to Northumbrian colors without being too obvious in her diplomatic gesture. Her hair was arranged in an elegant style adorned with pearls, and around her neck hung her grandmother's diamond pendant, a family heirloom worn only for the most significant occasions. Though she presented a picture of regal composure, her heart raced with a mixture of anticipation and uncertainty. Somewhere in this hall, Prince Rowan of Northumbria waited to be formally presented, the man who might soon become her betrothed. More importantly, somewhere in the castle, perhaps even now returning to court, was Leonhart, no longer bound for distant exile, but free to resume his position in Eldoria. The court herald struck his staff against the marble floor 3 times, bringing the assembly to attention. His Royal Highness, Prince Rowan of Northumbria, heir to the Northern Throne, commander of the Raven Fleet, Duke of Ravenscroft. The massive oak doors at the far end of the hall swung open. All heads turned as a tall figure entered, flanked by Northumbrian guards in midnight blue and silver. Prince Rowan strode forward with confident steps, his bearing military but not rigid, his gaze direct as he approached the royal dais. Isabel's first impression was of controlled power. The prince was older than she had expected, perhaps 40 or 41, near Leonhardt's age, with broad shoulders and the build of a man accustomed to physical training. His face was handsome in a weathered way, with strong features. A neatly trimmed beard shot through with occasional silver, and eyes of such a piercing blue they were visible even from a distance. As he drew closer, she noted other details. The absence of ostentatious jewelry, save for a single signet ring. The quality of his attire evident in its cut, rather than excessive ornamentation. The sword at his hip that appeared well used rather than merely decorative. This was no pampered royal who had never seen battle, but a warrior prince who had earned his titles. Prince Rowan stopped at the appropriate distance before the dais and executed a bow that was perfectly respectful without being obsequious. "King Edmund, Queen Eleanor," he greeted them, his voice deep and resonant. "I bring greetings from my father, King Harold of Northumbria, and his sincere wishes for a prosperous alliance between our kingdoms." "Prince Rowan," King Edmund replied formally, "Eldoria welcomes you and the prospect of friendship with Northumbria after too many years of division." The diplomatic exchange continued with practiced phrases from both sides, but Isabel found herself studying the prince's face, searching for clues to his character. There was intelligence in his eyes, certainly, and confidence, but not the cold calculation she had come to recognize in Duke Radcliffe's gaze. When he smiled at something her father said, the expression seemed genuine. Finally, the formal introduction reached her. King Edmund gestured to Isabel with evident pride. "My daughter, Princess Isabel of Eldoria." Prince Rowan turned his attention to her fully for the first time, and something in his expression shifted, a momentary flash of what might have been surprise before he mastered it. He bowed again, more deeply this time. "Princess Isabel," he said, "your beauty is renowned throughout the northern kingdoms, but I find even the most glowing reports have done you insufficient justice." It was a courtly compliment, the kind exchanged 1,000 times in royal receptions, yet he delivered it with a directness that gave the words weight. Isabel inclined her head in acknowledgement. "You are kind, your highness," she replied, "though I suspect Northumbrian princes are well practiced in charming phrases." A hint of genuine amusement flickered in his eyes. "We are better known for plain speaking, actually, sometimes to the dismay of our diplomats, but even the plainest speech must acknowledge evident truth." Before she could respond, King Edmund intervened. "Come, Prince Rowan, join us. There is much to discuss regarding the future of our kingdoms." The formalities of the reception continued, introductions to key nobles, ceremonial toasts, the careful dance of diplomacy performed against the backdrop of music and polite conversation. Through it all, Prince Rowan conducted himself with a straightforward dignity that contrasted sharply with Duke Radcliffe's calculated charm. He spoke directly, listened attentively, and seemed genuinely interested in learning about Eldoria beyond its political significance. When the formal portion of the evening gave way to dancing, the prince approached Isabel again, this time without the weight of the entire court's attention upon them. "Would you honor me with a dance, princess?" he asked. "I fear Northumbrian steps may lack the refinement of Eldorian court dances, but I promise to tread on your toes only minimally." The self-deprecating humor surprised a smile from her. "I would be pleased to accept, your highness, and I shall consider any foot-treading a cultural exchange rather than an affront." As they took their positions for the pavan, a stately dance that allowed for conversation, Isabel found herself unexpectedly at ease. The prince moved with more grace than his warrior bearing had suggested, and his hand on hers was respectful in its light touch. "I imagine this has been a rather bewildering few days for you," he commented as they circled each other in the dance's pattern. "That would be an understatement, your highness," she replied candidly. 3 days ago I stood at the altar prepared to marry one man, and now I find myself discussing alliance with another." "Rowan, please," he said, "at least in conversation, if not in formal address. And yes, the timing of my father's proposal was precipitous. For that, I apologize." The acknowledgement of the awkward circumstances took her by surprise. "You speak as if you had some say in the matter." A slight smile touched his bearded lips. "More than might be typical. My father and I enjoy an unusual relationship for royalty. He values my counsel, even when it contradicts his own inclinations." "And did you counsel him in this matter?" Isabel asked, genuinely curious. "This proposed alliance?" "I did," Rowan admitted, "though the timing was his decision. King Harold has always had a flair for the dramatic, a trait I fortunately did not inherit. As the dance brought them close again, Isabel studied his face. "May I speak plainly, Your High... Rowan? I would prefer it greatly to diplomatic niceties. Why this alliance? Why now? After generations of conflict between our kingdoms, this sudden desire for unity seems convenient." If he was offended by her directness, he didn't show it. Several reasons, some more politic than others. He guided her through a turn before continuing. "The official reason is strategic advantage. Combined, our kingdoms would be strong enough to deter Eastern aggression and establish more favorable trade terms with the Southern empires." "And the unofficial reasons?" she pressed. Rowan's blue eyes held hers steadily. "Information came to us regarding Duke Radcliffe's true ambitions that would destabilize the entire northern region if realized. My father believed warning your father was not merely advantageous but morally necessary." "How very principled," Isabel observed, not entirely keeping the skepticism from her voice. "You doubt our motives," he said, making it a statement rather than a question. "That's wise. Trust should be earned, not assumed, especially between former adversaries." The dance separated them briefly, giving Isabel a moment to gather her thoughts. When they came together again, she decided to push further. "And our potential marriage? Is that merely the diplomatic seal on an advantageous arrangement?" For the first time, Rowan seemed to choose his words with greater care. "Marriage between royal houses is always political at its foundation. That is the reality we both grew up understanding. But the choice of you specifically as the proposed bride, that involved considerations beyond mere politics." "What considerations?" Isabel asked, intrigued despite herself. "Your reputation precedes you, Princess," he replied. "Not just for beauty, which is evident, but for intelligence, compassion, and a strength of character unusual in court circles. These are qualities I have come to value above all others." The compliment, delivered with quiet sincerity, warmed her more than any of the florid praises Duke Radcliffe had ever offered. Before she could respond, however, a commotion near the hall's entrance drew their attention. The dancers faltered as all heads turned toward the disturbance. Duke Radcliffe stood in the doorway, his face flushed with either wine or anger, surrounded by his personal guards who looked distinctly uncomfortable. He had clearly been drinking, his normally immaculate appearance somewhat disheveled. "How touching," he called, his voice carrying through the suddenly silent hall. "The princess already dances with her new suitor, while the body of her previous engagement isn't yet cold." King Edmund rose from his seat, his expression thunderous. "Duke Radcliffe, you forget yourself. If you cannot maintain the dignity expected at court, perhaps you should retire for the evening." "Dignity?" Radcliffe laughed bitterly. "Where was dignity when you broke our alliance for a better offer? Where was dignity when you humiliated me before the entire northern nobility?" Prince Rowan had stepped slightly in front of Isabel, a subtle protective gesture that didn't escape her notice. "This is neither the time nor the place for such discussions, Duke," he said calmly. "Perhaps when cooler heads prevail—" "Silence, Northumbrian," Radcliffe snapped. "I have no interest in the opinion of the man who stole what was rightfully mine." The tension in the hall was palpable, nobles drawing back as the Duke advanced toward the center of the room. His hand rested on his ceremonial dagger, an alarming breach of protocol in the royal presence. "Nothing was stolen," King Edmund stated firmly. "Agreements were reconsidered in light of new information that cast significant doubt on your suitability as an ally." Radcliffe's eyes narrowed dangerously. "What information?" "Your dealings with Eastern emissaries," the king replied. "Your offers to grant them passage through your territories in exchange for support in future endeavors against Eldoria." A flash of genuine shock crossed the Duke's face before it hardened into cold fury. "Lies and fabrications, no doubt planted by your new Northumbrian friends to drive a wedge between us." "The evidence was compelling," Queen Eleanor commented from her seat beside the king. "Multiple sources, documents bearing your seal." "Forgeries," Radcliffe's voice rose. "I demand to see this so-called evidence. I demand to face my accusers." "In due time," King Edmund assured him, his tone growing colder. "For now, I suggest you return to your chambers and compose yourself. We can discuss terms of dissolution for our former alliance when you're more rational. The Duke's hand tightened on his dagger. For a tense moment, Isabel feared he might actually draw the weapon in the presence of the king, an act of treason that would justify immediate execution. But after what seemed an eternity, his hand fell away. "This isn't finished," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You've made a grave error, Edmund. One you'll live to regret." With that ominous pronouncement, he turned on his heel and stalked from the hall, his guards hurrying to keep pace with his angry strides. A collective exhale seemed to pass through the assembly once he had gone. "Well," Prince Rowan commented dryly, "that was rather more excitement than one typically expects at a diplomatic reception." Despite the tension of the moment, Isabel found herself smiling at his understated humor. Duke Radcliffe has never been one to accept disappointment gracefully. So I observed. Rowan's expression grew more serious. "He will be a dangerous enemy, Princess. His pride has been wounded publicly, twice now. Men like that rarely forgive such insults." "I'm aware," she replied. "Though I confess, I find the prospect of his enmity less troubling than the prospect of his continued proximity as a husband would have been." The prince studied her face thoughtfully. "You truly did not wish to marry him." It wasn't a question, but Isabel answered anyway. "My wishes were secondary to Eldoria's needs, as they always have been, and should be." She hesitated, then added more quietly, "But no, I did not wish it. The Duke sees people as pieces to be moved in his grand strategy, not as individuals with value beyond their utility." "And how do you see me, Princess?" Rowan asked unexpectedly. "As merely a more palatable alternative to an undesired match? Or something else?" The directness of the question caught her off guard. She considered deflecting with a diplomatic answer, then decided that his honesty deserved equal candor in return. "I don't know yet," she admitted. "We've only just met. But I see a man who speaks directly when others would dissemble, who values principle alongside pragmatism, who moves to protect instinctively, not as a calculated gesture." She met his gaze steadily. "These are promising beginnings to an assessment, if not yet a complete one." His smile was warm and genuine. "A fair answer, and honest, which I value above flattery." Before their conversation could continue, King Edmund approached, signaling an end to their brief moment of relative privacy. "Prince Rowan," the king addressed him, "in light of Duke Radcliffe's concerning behavior, I believe we should advance our discussions. Would you join me and my advisors in the council chamber?" "Of course, Your Majesty." Rowan agreed readily. He turned to Isabel with a slight bow. "Princess, it has been a pleasure. I hope we'll have opportunity for further conversation before any formal decisions are made." "I would welcome that," she replied sincerely. As the men departed for their council session, Queen Eleanor appeared at Isabel's side. "An interesting man, our Northumbrian prince," she observed, "quite different from what one might expect." "Yes," Isabel agreed. "He seems genuine, a rare quality in diplomatic circles. And far more compatible with you than Radcliffe ever would have been," her mother added shrewdly. "Though I sense your thoughts are not entirely focused on the prince tonight." Isabel glanced at her mother, finding knowing warmth in the queen's expression. "Is he back?" she asked simply, not bothering to pretend ignorance of the reference. "Sir Leonhart returned to the castle an hour ago," Eleanor confirmed. "Your father thought it best he not attend tonight's reception, to avoid further provocation of Duke Radcliffe, but he has been reinstated to his former position and quarters." Relief and joy surged through Isabel, though she maintained her composed exterior in the public setting. "I'm pleased to hear it. His skills and loyalty are valuable assets to the crown." "Indeed," her mother agreed, a slight smile playing at her lips. "Assets that may prove particularly valuable in the days ahead, given Radcliffe's obvious intentions." "You believe he'll move against us?" Isabel asked quietly. "I believe a wounded predator is at its most dangerous," the Queen replied. "Radcliffe will not accept this humiliation without response. The question is merely what form that response will take." As if summoned by their discussion of threats, Captain Galen of the Royal Guard approached, bowing respectfully. "Your Majesties, I apologize for the interruption, but there's a matter requiring the princess's attention." "What is it, Captain?" Isabel asked. "A message, Your Highness, delivered with some urgency." He hesitated, then added, "From Sir Leonhart." Isabel's heart jumped, though she kept her expression neutral. "I see. And the nature of this message?" "He asked only that I tell you he awaits at the East Garden fountain, with information that cannot wait until morning." The captain's carefully neutral tone suggested he suspected the message might be more personal than official, but was too discreet to imply as much. Queen Eleanor exchanged a glance with her daughter. "The East Garden is quite close to my private solar," she observed casually. "Perhaps, Princess, you might escort me there before attending to this message? The excitement of the evening has left me somewhat fatigued." It was a transparent excuse to provide Isabel with a legitimate reason to leave the reception and a chaperoned path to a more private meeting. Gratitude welled within her for her mother's understanding and assistance. "Of course, Mother," she agreed. "Captain Galen, please inform Sir Leonhart that I will join him shortly, after attending to the Queen." As they made their way from the Great Hall, Isabel felt a curious sense of destiny unfolding. The world that had seemed so fixed and determined just days ago had transformed into a landscape of new possibilities. Prince Rowan offered a political alliance potentially compatible with personal happiness. Duke Radcliffe's removal as her intended husband freed her from a lifetime of calculated control. And Leonhart, her Leonhart, had returned from exile before it had truly begun. What message could be so urgent it couldn't wait until morning? And what future might now be possible that had seemed forever closed to her just days before? The answers awaited in the East Garden, where a fountain played beneath the stars, and a knight who had never stopped loving her waited with news that would change everything once again. The East Garden of Eldoria Castle was a place of quiet beauty, especially at night. Moonlight silvered the carefully tended paths and illuminated the ancient marble fountain at its center, a masterwork depicting the kingdom's mythical founding, where water flowed from the pitcher of an eternally youthful maiden. Roses climbed trellises along the stone walls, their fragrance sweetening the night air, while carefully shaped topiaries cast mysterious shadows across the manicured lawns. Isabel entered the garden alone, having left Queen Eleanor at her solar with Lady Beatrice in attendance. The Queen had squeezed her daughter's hand before departing, a silent communication of both understanding and caution. Even with Duke Radcliffe's threat neutralized, there were still appearances to maintain, still protocols to observe, at least outwardly. Her heart quickened as she followed the moonlit path toward the fountain. After days of turmoil and rapid change, after believing Leonhart lost to her across distant seas, the knowledge that he waited just ahead filled her with an almost dizzying anticipation. And then she saw him, standing beside the fountain with his back to her, his familiar silhouette etched against the silver spray of water. At 40, Sir Leonhart cut an imposing figure, tall and broad-shouldered, his posture that of a man who had spent his life in service and battle. He wore a simple tunic and breeches rather than his formal armor or court attire, suggesting he had come directly from his quarters without taking time for ceremony. As if sensing her presence, he turned. For a moment they simply gazed at each other across the short distance that separated them, drinking in the sight after days of believing their farewell might be their last for years. "Princess," he said finally, bowing with ingrained formality despite the privacy of their meeting. "Sir Leonhart," she replied, closing the distance between them with measured steps. "Captain Galen said you had urgent information that couldn't wait until morning." A slight smile touched his lips. "A necessary explanation, though not entirely accurate. My urgency was of a more personal nature." "Oh?" she prompted, stopping an arm's length away, observing the courtly distance propriety demanded, even as her heart urged her closer. "I needed to see you," he said simply. "To confirm with my own eyes what I've been told, that your marriage to Duke Radcliffe has been cancelled, that a new alliance with Northumbria is being negotiated." "It's true," she confirmed, her voice softening. "Everything has changed in the span of 3 days. The wedding was interrupted by news of a Northumbrian fleet, which proved to be more diplomatic than threatening. King Harold offered an alliance sealed by my marriage to his son instead, along with significant territorial concessions. And your father accepted. He did. Apparently there was evidence that Duke Radcliffe had been secretly negotiating with our eastern enemies, planning to betray Eldoria once our kingdoms were joined through marriage. Leonhardt's expression darkened. That matches what I discovered in Meridia, or rather what I would have discovered had I actually sailed there. You never left? Isabel asked, though her mother had already confirmed as much. The ship departed as scheduled, but I was removed secretly before it cleared the harbor, he explained. Your father had received whispers of Radcliffe's duplicity but needed confirmation before acting. He sent me to investigate, not to Meridia, but to the eastern border towns where Alvermont's agents were reportedly meeting with foreign emissaries. Understanding dawned on Isabel's face. So the exile was a cover for a secret mission. Partly, Leonhardt acknowledged. Radcliffe's demand for my removal was genuine, as was your father's need to appease him temporarily. The mission allowed both objectives to be met while seeking the truth about Alvermont's loyalties. And what did you find? Confirmation of everything Northumbria claimed, and worse. He replied gravely. The Duke has been building a network of alliances with multiple Eastern powers, promising each exclusive rights to Eldorian resources. Once he controlled the kingdom through marriage to you, he planned to isolate your father politically, then force his abdication, with you as his claim to the throne. Isabel shuddered at how close she had come to being trapped in such a marriage. No wonder he reacted so violently to being replaced by Prince Rowan. His entire scheme collapsed in an instant. A cornered predator is at his most dangerous, Leonhardt warned. Radcliffe won't simply retreat to Alvermont to lick his wounds. He'll seek revenge for this public humiliation. My mother said something similar. Isabel hesitated, then asked the question uppermost in her mind. Will you stay now? In Eldoria? His expression softened. If my king commands it. And if I request it? She asked quietly. Leonhardt's eyes held hers, the formal mask of the night slipping to reveal the man beneath. Then nothing in this world could move me from your side, princess. The sincerity in his voice made her breath catch. They stood in silence for a moment, the fountain's gentle splashing the only sound between them. Tell me about Prince Rowan, Leonhardt said finally, his tone carefully neutral. Is he worthy of you? The question surprised her. You're asking if I approve of my new intended husband? I'm asking if he will treat you with the respect and care you deserve, he clarified. If this alliance will bring you a measure of happiness alongside duty. Isabel considered her brief interactions with the Northumbrian prince. He seems honorable, direct in speech, thoughtful in manner, very different from Duke Radcliffe. She smiled slightly. He reminds me somewhat of you, actually, a warrior with principles beyond battlefield prowess. Leonhardt's expression remained carefully controlled. Then I am glad for you, princess. You deserve a husband who values you as more than a political asset. Nothing is settled yet, she reminded him. The alliance is being negotiated, but no formal betrothal has been announced. My father wishes to proceed more cautiously this time, to verify Northumbria's intentions and claims before committing. Wise, Leonhardt agreed. Though if King Harold's evidence against Radcliffe proved accurate, it suggests a certain trustworthiness. A cool night breeze stirred the garden, causing Isabel to shiver slightly in her court dress, which was designed for the heated great hall rather than outdoor meetings. Without hesitation, Leonhardt removed his cloak and wrapped it gently around her shoulders. The gesture brought them closer than propriety would normally allow, the warmth of his body briefly enveloping her as he adjusted the fabric. Thank you, she murmured, resisting the urge to lean into his strength. He stepped back to a more appropriate distance, though his eyes never left hers. Princess Isabel, there is something else I must tell you. Something I discovered during my investigation that changes everything. The serious tone of his voice alarmed her. What is it? Leonhardt seemed to struggle with where to begin. Do you recall our conversation at the hunting lodge? When I mentioned that the Duke had demanded my exile because he recognized how I looked at you? I remember every word we exchanged there, she confirmed softly. What neither of us knew then was that there was another reason, a deeper reason, for his insistence on my removal from court. Leonhardt took a deep breath. During my investigation, I uncovered records, birth records, letters, secret correspondence, that Radcliffe had been gathering to use against your father if necessary. What kind of records? Documents concerning my birth, he said carefully. My mother was a commoner, as I've always known, a servant in the royal household. But my father... He hesitated, then continued with grave certainty. My father was King Edmund. Isabel felt as if the ground had dropped away beneath her. What? That's impossible. My father would never... It was before his marriage to your mother, Leonhardt explained quickly, when he was still crown prince. He loved my mother, by all accounts, but royal duty prevented their union. When she discovered she was with child, she was sent away from court for the duration of her pregnancy. After my birth, I was given to Lord Valgreen to raise as his ward, my true parentage kept secret to avoid scandal. Does my father know? Isabel whispered, her mind reeling with implications. He knows now, Leonhardt confirmed. I presented the evidence to him upon my return. He confirmed the truth of it. The revelation explained so much. Her father's favoritism toward Leonhardt throughout his career, the harshness of his reaction when they were discovered together, his conflicted behavior since. It wasn't merely disappointment in a trusted knight. It was a father's complicated emotions regarding his hidden son. This makes you... She began, struggling to process the full implications. Your half-brother, he finished, his voice strained. Which is why I had to tell you immediately, before... He didn't complete the thought, but the anguish in his eyes made his meaning clear, before their feelings for each other led them further down a path that could never be. Isabel felt her world spinning, joy and shock and grief colliding in a maelstrom of emotion. How can you be certain? She asked, grasping for any possibility that might undo this cruel twist of fate. The documents are conclusive, he said grimly. Letters in your father's own hand, my mother's diary, sworn statements from those who arranged my placement with Lord Valgren. Radcliffe had assembled them as leverage, proof that your father had hidden a bastard son who could potentially challenge your claim to the throne. Does anyone else know? Only your father, and now you, Leonhardt assured her. Radcliffe may suspect based on the evidence he collected, but he lacks final confirmation. Your mother. He hesitated. I don't know if your father has told her yet. Isabel turned away, moving to the fountain's edge to gather her thoughts. The reflection of the moon wavered in the rippling water, fragmenting and reforming like her understanding of her own life and family. So this is why, she said quietly. Why my father separated us so dramatically after the incident at court. Why he accepted Radcliffe's demand for your exile without more resistance. He feared the truth might emerge if we remained close. Yes, Leonhardt acknowledged, remaining where he stood, though I believe he was genuinely shocked by the discovery of our feelings for each other. He had arranged my placement in the Royal Guard, kept me near but not too near. He never anticipated that we might fall in love, she finished for him, turning back to face him. As we did. The pain in his eyes mirrored her own. As we did, he agreed softly. A love that can never be fulfilled now that we know the truth. A heavy silence fell between them, filled with the weight of what they had lost in the moment of discovery. The bond between them, already complicated by rank and duty, was now rendered impossible by blood. What happens now? Isabel asked finally. I've asked your father, the king, for permission to take command of the northern garrison at Frostwatch, Leonhardt replied. It's far enough from court to avoid any whispers or suspicions, yet close enough to remain in service to Eldoria. I believe it's best for both of us. You would still exile yourself. The thought of losing him again, so soon after believing him returned to her, sent a sharp pain through her heart. Not exile, he corrected gently. Strategic deployment. Radcliffe remains a threat, possibly more dangerous now than before. The northern borders will need experienced leadership in the difficult days ahead. Isabel knew he was right, knew that separation was the only sensible course, yet couldn't bear the finality of it. "When do you leave?" "After your betrothal to Prince Rowan is formalized," he said. "The king wishes me to remain at court until then as a precaution against any move Radcliffe might make in his desperation." They stood in silence once more, the night breeze carrying the scent of roses around them, the fountain's gentle music a counterpoint to the turmoil of their hearts. So much had changed in so little time, and now they faced a truth that changed everything yet again. "I need to ask you something," Isabel said finally. "Something that's been troubling me since the hunting lodge." "Anything," he promised. "If you had known then what you know now, about your birth, about our relation, would you still have—" She couldn't finish the question. Leonhardt's face showed the struggle between honesty and comfort. "I want to say no," he admitted. "That had I known, I would never have allowed my heart to follow where it led. But the truth is, Isabel, I have loved you from the first moment I saw you truly, not as a child princess, but as the woman you became. That love was formed before knowledge, before choice even. It simply was." He paused, his voice growing rougher with emotion. "And it still is, though now it must change its shape into something different." His honesty broke something inside her, the last fragile hope that perhaps there might still be a way forward for them as they had dreamed at the hunting lodge. Tears filled her eyes, though she refused to let them fall. "I understand now why my mother said some doors remain closed no matter how desperately we wish to open them," she said softly. "And why my father spoke to me of having to choose what is right over what is politically expedient. They knew, or at least suspected, what you would discover." "I believe they did," Leonhardt agreed. "The Queen has always seen more clearly than most." Isabel drew his cloak more tightly around her shoulders, taking what comfort she could from its warmth and the lingering scent of him. "So I am to marry Prince Rowan, secure Eldoria's northern alliance, and you will command Frostwatch Keep. Our paths set far apart by this revelation. It's the only way," he said gently, "for both our sakes, and for the kingdom's stability." She knew he was right, knew that duty and honor and simple decency required their separation now that they understood the truth of their connection. Yet the heart that had rejoiced at his return now broke at the knowledge that their closeness could never be what they had once dreamed. "There is one comfort," Leonhardt offered after a moment. "A small one perhaps, but real nonetheless." "What comfort could possibly exist in this situation?" she asked. He smiled sadly. "That though we cannot be what we once hoped to be to each other, we need not be strangers. I am still sworn to your service, as a knight to his princess, as a brother to his sister. That bond, though different from what we wished, is still sacred in its own way." Isabel considered his words, finding in them a slender thread of solace. "I had no siblings growing up," she said thoughtfully. "I always wondered what it might be like to have a brother. And I often imagined what it would be like to have family beyond my foster parents," he replied. "Perhaps in time, we might find a way to honor that connection without the pain that accompanies it now." A distant bell tolled from the castle tower, marking the late hour. Isabel knew she should return to her chambers soon, before her absence from the reception was noted and questioned. Yet she found herself reluctant to end this moment, painful though it was, their first true understanding of who they were to each other and who they could never be. "I should go," she said finally. "The court will be dispersing from the reception, and questions would arise if I'm not seen returning to my chambers." Leonhardt nodded. "Of course, Princess." The return to formal address signaled the beginning of their new relationship, the careful distance that must now exist between them. Isabel slipped his cloak from her shoulders and returned it to him, their fingers briefly touching in the exchange. "Thank you," she said, "for telling me the truth yourself, rather than letting me learn it from others." "You deserve nothing less," he replied. "You always have." As she turned to leave, he spoke once more. "Isabel." When she looked back, he added softly, "Prince Rowan seems a good man, from what little I've observed and heard. I believe he will value you as you deserve to be valued. The simple blessing, clearly difficult for him to offer, touched her deeply. Thank you, Leonhardt. That means more than you know. With a final nod, she moved back along the garden path toward the castle, her heart heavy, yet somehow lighter for having faced the truth together. The moonlight illuminated her way, casting her shadow long across the manicured lawns, a solitary figure moving forward into a future once again transformed by forces beyond her control. Behind her, Leonhardt remained by the fountain, watching until she disappeared from view, his face bearing the composed resignation of a man who had spent his life accepting duties and burdens without complaint. Only when she was gone did he allow himself a moment of private grief for what could never be, before straightening his shoulders and turning toward his own path, different from what he had hoped, but clear in its direction and purpose. The garden fell silent save for the eternal music of the fountain, its waters flowing endlessly from the pitcher of the maiden who had witnessed countless royal secrets over the centuries, yet kept them all in marble silence beneath the watching stars.